Chapter 474. Among the techniques that Chu Xiu possessed, the Great Inner Demon Rotation Technique and the 9 forms of Soul Catcher were the ones that Chu Xiu was unwilling to reveal in front of outsiders. After all, these 2 techniques were authentic Kunlun devil cult martial arts. Although very few people knew about them, Chu Xiu could not guarantee that no one would be able to recognize them. Right now, Chu Xiu's identity and his identity as a member of the Kunlun demon sect were both in the light and in the dark. Chu Xiu didn't wish to reveal his identity so early on. Therefore, Chu Xiu rarely used these 2 techniques. Even if he did, he would only choose a martial art that did not have obvious external characteristics. Just like the silk soul net that Chu Xiu had used when he schemed against Iron Sword sect Xinqingyong, its external characteristics were not obvious. This Great Inner Demon Rotation Technique, which was directly combined with the Great Soul Shifting Technique of extinguishing heaven and extinguishing earth, was the same. Other than Zongxian himself, outsiders would not be able to see any special characteristics. At that moment, in the boundless illusion, the Buddhist light in Zongxian's eyes dimmed. He really did not expect this move from Chu Xiu. All along, when Chu Xiu fought with him, the martial arts that he had displayed leaned towards the fierce and overbearing type. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu would actually use such an evil primordial spirit's secret technique? Given Zongxian's character, he would not even bother to understand information about Chu Xiu. It should be said that Zongxian would not understand any opponent's information. Moreover, even if he knew that Chu Xiu was proficient in primordial spirit's secret techniques, so what? In any case, for Zongxian, no matter what he faced, there was only one way to deal with it, and that was to directly crush it. Zongxian's hands formed a strange hand seal. Compared to the fierce and imposing Wisdom King seal, this hand seal actually gave off an extremely gentle feeling. In an instant, the Buddhist light in Zongxian's eyes shone brightly again. Behind him, an illusion of the medicine-glazed light Buddha Lord appeared, sitting on a lotus platform with a solemn expression. Break. Zongxian calmly spat out a single word. In an instant, a boundless power of blood and qi shot up into the sky. The reason why essence spirit mystic techniques were strange was that there were very few ways to deal with essence spirit mystic techniques. Either you were proficient in essence soul mystic arts to begin with, then you could withstand the collision head-on. Otherwise, he would completely rely on his own powerful vital energy and blood to deal with the impact of the essence soul mystic technique. Those with strong qi and blood would have stable and resolute psyche power. Naturally, they would have a strong resistance to psyche power impacts. This was also the reason why some of the evil creatures in the forest would often find some thin and weak ordinary people, and not some martial arts experts. However, using such a method to deal with essence soul mystic arts could only be described in one word: forcefully resisting. He could only passively defend, unable to counterattack. But now, Zongxian was telling everyone that when one's vital qi and blood reached a certain level, it could also counteract one's spiritual power. Just like what was happening right now. As the power of blood and blood burst forth, those evil ghosts were all smashed into smithereens. The Shura goddess wailed in anguish and dissipated. Even the gods and Buddhas that filled the skies let out cries of indignation before finally disappearing. Taking another step forward, the darkness before him was torn apart. Zongxian didn't even bother to take a look as he sent out yet another bright ruler seal. Zongxian's prediction was right. The moment Chu Xiu pulled Zongxian into that illusion, he had already decided to strike. Chu Xiu didn't choose to use his full strength to activate that illusion. This was because he knew that against an existence of Zongxian's level, even if he used his full strength, it would be useless. He might as well use it to delay the other party for a period of time. In reality, that was indeed the case. That illusion didn't even delay Zongxian for a breath's time before it was broken by him. But to Chu Xiu, this was enough. At this instant, Buddha's light shone brightly around Chu Xiu, and a Vairocana Dharma form appeared behind him. As Chu Xiu formed hand seals, his figure and the Vairocana Dharma form became more and more compatible. Chu Xiu placed his right hand in front of his chest, forming the fearless seal. His Dharma form was solemn. In an instant, endless light bloomed. The blood in Chu Xiu's body seemed to be boiling, burning with a scorching Buddha's flame. It turned into the power of Vairocana Dharma form and released countless Buddha's light that shrouded Zongxian. Sun-changing technique. Seizing the fortune of heaven and earth, stealing the sky and changing the sun. Its power was limitless. Moreover, this sun-changing technique wasn't the original version of the sun-changing technique. Instead, it was the sun-changing technique that Master Tam Yuan had developed after comprehending and evolving it. Now that he had been imparted by Master Tam Yuan, Chu Xiu could use 80% of the power of the sun-changing technique. Therefore, while its power was strong, Chu Xiu almost couldn't control this powerful technique. Bathed in the endless Buddha's light, Zongxian's wisdom king seal shattered for the first time. This was the first time it was shattered by Chu Xiu head-on. Raising his head to look at the Vairocana Dharma form that was shining with resplendent Buddha's flame, Zongxian chose to be on the defensive for the first time. The Buddha's light around him dissipated, and in its place, a cold moonlight appeared. The alchemist Vairocana light Buddha's Dharma form appeared behind him. It was much clearer than the Vairocana Dharma form behind Chu Xiu. Amidst the flawless moonlight, the alchemist Vairocana light Buddha's Dharma form formed a dhyana seal. A strange power was emitted. It wasn't earth chi, but it wasn't heaven and earth energy either. However, this power circled around Zongxian's body, causing the Vairocana light Buddha's sun-changing technique to shine even brighter. It was actually going against Chu Xiu's sun-changing technique. One was the sun, and the other was the moonlight. However, neither of them gave way. At the side, Ming Qi's eyes flashed with anxiety when he saw this. He had never imagined that Chu Xiu would actually become so powerful after obtaining Master Tan Yuan's inheritance. He was actually able to fight with Zongxian to such an extent. This caused Ming Qi to be unable to help but become anxious. Zongxian couldn't lose. To the Great Light Temple, Zongxian was the face of the Great Light Temple. There were many young talents in the world who respected Taoism and Buddhism. Other than Zhang Qingjun of the Celestial Master's abode, Zongxian couldn't lose to anyone, let alone Chu Xiu, who was several ranks lower than Zongxian. This time, the Great Light Temple only wanted to obtain Master Tam Yuan's legacy and make a fuss in the East Sea. However, the one who made Zongxian attack Chu Xiu was Ming Qi. If anything happened to Zongxian this time, he would be the one to be severely punished when he returned to the Great Light Temple. Ming Qi gritted his teeth. A weak Buddha's light bloomed in his hands. His 10 fingers formed various hand seals and he quickly deduced. This was the Great Light Temple's triple reincarnation's future scripture. It was said that when cultivated to its peak, one could even deduce the future of 3 lifetimes. In theory, it was similar to Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air. However, Chu Xiu's sun gazing at air was a secret scripture of Taoism. Its main use was still in combat. It could only see what was in front of one's eyes and could not see other futures. It could not be used for divination, but at the same time, the speed of the sun gazing at air far exceeded that of the triple reincarnation's future scripture. There was no need for such complicated hand seals to deduce. At this time, Ming Qi was using all his strength to deduce the flaws on Chu Xiu's side. He was prepared to intervene later. Zongxian's expression had always been like that of a statue. Ming Qi couldn't tell if he had the upper hand or if he wasn't. So, for safety's sake, even if others said that Ming Qi's sneak attack was shameless, he still had to intervene. But at this moment, a beam of sword chi blasted behind him, giving Ming Qi a huge fright. It also interrupted Ming Qi's deduction. Ming Qi looked behind him and saw Fang Qi Shao, who was holding a wine pot and looking like he was watching the show. He could not help but say angrily, "Fang Qi Shao. What is the meaning of this?" Fang Qi Shao spread his hands and said, "It's fair. They're fighting so well, so why do you have to intervene? If you have the time, why don't you deduce if you will be punished when you return to the Great Light Temple? That way, you can be prepared." Ming Qi was so angry that his eyebrows twitched. He shouted in a low voice, "Fang Qi Shao. The Great Light Temple has no enmity with you, and Chu Xiu also has enmity with your Sword King city. Are you crazy? Why are you helping Chu Xiu? Fang Qixiao shook his head with a serious expression and said, I'm not helping Chu Xiu. I'm just watching the show. You can't interrupt such a wonderful show. This is a warning. Next time, I'd like to see if your triple lifetimes future sutra is faster or if my karma sword path is faster. It was rare for Fang Qixiao to be serious. Although he seemed to be looking for an excuse, he was actually telling the truth. He was really watching the show. As the third person on the Longhu list, Fang Qixiao had fought with Zhong Xian before. However, he had been at a disadvantage. Perhaps it was because he wanted to save face, or perhaps it was because he was not confident. Fang Qixiao almost never fought with Zhong Xian again after he was at a disadvantage. However, Zhong Xian had used his full strength when he fought with Chu Xiu this time. Watching their fight would be beneficial to Fang Qixiao, who was in the same realm as them. Therefore, he could not let Ming Qi ruin everything. When Ming Qi saw Fang Qixiao's expression, he was so angry that his face turned red. However, he did not dare to make another move. Ming Qi knew how terrifying Zhong Xian was, and it was needless to say how terrifying Fang Qixiao, who was only one rank lower than Zhong Xian, was. While Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian were still in a stalemate, a sigh was heard from the inn. Sigh, let's stop. Everyone from the Great Light Temple, I was the one who chose my successor. I'm already so old. Don't tell me I don't even have the right to choose my own successor. Master Tam Yuan walked out of the inn slowly with a helpless look on his face. He had thought that since Chu Xiu had appeared, it meant that the inheritance had been completed, and the people from the Great Light Temple would retreat. However, he did not expect them to still want to make a move. It had been a long time since he stepped into the Central Plains, and the Great Light Temple had become completely different from what he remembered. Perhaps Master Tam Yuan had never really understood what the Great Light Temple was, because at that time, he did not have the right to come into contact with the real Great Light Temple with his abilities and status. Chapter 475. As Master Tam Yuan spoke up, Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian could no longer continue fighting. After all, Master Tam Yuan was about to die. If the Great Light Temple were to force him to take back the technique that he had passed to Chu Xiu, it would be too much. Hence, Ming Qi could only pinch his nose and say, Zhong Xian, stop fighting. Stop. However, this time, Zhong Xian did not listen to Ming Qi's order to stop immediately. Instead, his eyes shone brightly, and he only stopped after a while. Fang Qixiao, who was at the back, stroked his chin. After Chu Xiu entered the unity of heaven and man realm, his combat power was not weak at all. He could actually force Zhong Xian into a serious state. However, it was obvious that Chu Xiu had lost this round. After Zhong Xian retracted his hand, the radiance of the sun around Chu Xiu also dissipated. However, his face had already turned pale. The power of the sun-changing technique was not something that Chu Xiu could use as he wished. If he did not control the power of the sun-changing technique well, he would only end up hurting himself and others. Meanwhile, on Zhong Xian's side, he had only just started to get serious. If Master Tam Yuan did not show up, the person who would lose in the end would still be Chu Xiu. Ming Qi's expression was a little ugly as he cupped his hands at Master Tam Yuan and said, Master Tam Yuan, you're the publicly recognized holy monk of the Buddhist sect. We naturally can't control who you want to pass the technique to. However, this Chu Xiu has a ferocious reputation. If he were to use the cultivation technique you taught him to do something evil in the future, then the karma will be placed on you, and it will ruin your reputation in the future. I'm doing this for your own good. Master Tan Yuan smiled and said, this old monk appreciates the kindness of the Temple of Great Light, but let's talk about the future in the future. Karma is such a complicated thing, so how can you and I see through it now? As for my reputation, the so-called title of holy monk is also something that was forcefully added because of everyone's love for me. It doesn't matter if it's ruined. At that time, I'm afraid this old monk will already be a pile of bones. would I still need to care about my reputation? Hearing Master Tam Yuan's words, Ming Qi could only put on a gloomy expression as he reluctantly cupped his hands to bid farewell and turned to leave. Seeing Ming Qi's attitude, Chu Xiu couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. The Temple of Great Light was really used to being domineering. They actually sent such a person over. They were simply asking for trouble. Although Master Tan Yuan was alone, he still had the reputation of a holy monk. Not only was he recognized by Buddhism, but he was also a holy monk recognized by the entire martial arts world. The Temple of Great Light could be domineering to others, but to be so domineering to a person like Master Tam Yuan, who was about to die, was basically ruining their own reputation. This Ming Qi came from the Temple of Great Light's Karma Hall. Forget about the martial arts world, even in the Temple of Great Light, the Karma Hall's status was very high. It could even be said that in the Temple of Great Light, although the Karma Hall's combat power was not the strongest, their status was extraordinary. If the Temple of Great Light had only sent Ming Qi, it would have been fine. But in the end, they sent Zhong Xian, who was stubborn and did not know how to be flexible. In the end, it was not surprising that things had escalated to such a state. After Zhong Xian and Ming Qi left, Master Tam Yuan walked towards Long Tianying and the others. He sighed and said, "President Long, I've implicated you." Long Tianying hurriedly shook his head and said, "Don't say that, Master. It's just a small matter. Not to mention that we only suffered some minor injuries. Even if we had to risk our lives to stop the people from the Temple of Great Light, it would be worth it." Master Tam Yuan shook his head and said, "I'm already at the end of my rope, but President Long, you're still young. Don't talk about dying. Now that my wish has been fulfilled, I'm ready to return to my hometown. President Long, please go back." Long Tianying hurriedly shook his head and said, "I won't forget the kindness you've shown me in the past. The development of the Cetacean Society is already on the right track. It's fine for me to be away for a while. I hope Master can let me send you on your last journey." Hearing Long Tianying say that, Master Tam Yuan did not stop him. He only turned around to look at Chu Xiu and said, "Chu, I haven't been to the Central Plains for a long time. Can I trouble you to send me back to my hometown?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "It's my duty." Although he had obtained the cultivation method by deceiving Master Tam Yuan, Chu Xiu naturally would not refuse such a request. Just as Master Tam Yuan was about to leave, he suddenly saw Fang Qi Shao, who was also about to leave with a flagon of wine. Master Tam Yuan suddenly asked, "Young friend, please wait a moment. May I ask if you're from Sword King City?" Fang Qi Shao said somewhat gloomily, "Yes, what orders do you have for me, Master?" Just now, he had represented Sword King City in the crowd to present a gift to Master Tam Yuan. However, it seemed like Master Tam Yuan did not remember anything. Perhaps he had never paid attention to him from the beginning. To think that he, the dignified sword leader 7th young Master Fang, would one day be ignored by others. This was not a good feeling. Master Tam Yuan seemed to have seen through Fang Qi Shao's thoughts. He smiled and said, "Please don't blame me, young friend. When I came ashore, this old monk was focused on inheriting my martial arts. Because I don't have much time left, I was a bit anxious and didn't care about other things." Hearing Master Tam Yuan's words, Fang Qi Shao felt a little embarrassed. He waved his hand and said, "I don't blame you, Master." Smiling, Master Tan Yuan took out a jade slip from his bosom and handed it to the 7th young master. "This is a secret manual of the way of the sword that I obtained by accident. It is a manual left behind by a large sect of the way of the sword in the Eastern Sea thousands of years ago. There are only a few scattered sword techniques, but there is no complete sword technique. However, there are even more comprehensions left behind by the experts of the large sect. I believe that this thing will be very useful to you." 7th young Master Fang took the jade slip with a surprised look on his face. This thing was more than useful to him. It was simply a treasure. For Fang Qi Shao, who came from Sword King City, he did not lack sword arts. His Karma sword Dao did not need those messy sword arts. However, he could use other people's knowledge to improve himself. Things like sword practice experiences left behind by these ancient powerhouses were the most precious. After reading these things, it would definitely bring another level of understanding to his entire sword Dao. Fang Qishao asked hesitantly, Master, why are you giving me this thing? Master Tam Yuan smiled freely and said, I've obtained a lot of good things in the Eastern Sea over the years. I've already given what I can to others. Now that I'm about to pass away, these things can't be brought with me when I'm alive and I can't take them with me when I die. It's useless for me to keep them. Little friend, you came from Sword King City. This thing will definitely be much more valuable to you than to be buried with an old man like me. Compared to other martial artists, who viewed their martial arts inheritance as incomparably important, to the point that even if they died, they would take it with them to the underworld. Master Tan Yuan's view of martial arts was much more open-minded, and he even viewed it as an external object. Fang Qishao asked in surprise, Master, aren't you afraid that I'll do something evil after obtaining this thing and destroy it? After saying that, Fang Qishao glanced at Chu Xiu. He didn't think that Chu Xiu was a good person. Ming Qi's words actually made sense. Master Tam Yuan shook his head and said, I've said it before. Good and evil can't be judged on the surface. If a person wants to do evil, even if he doesn't have the slightest bit of strength, he can slaughter millions of people with just his mouth. Similarly, some people seem to kill a lot of people, but they can save even more people. Therefore, this old monk might as well bet that little friend won't let this old monk down. This sword arts record will definitely be more cost-effective to give to the descendants of the 5 great sword sects than to be buried with this old monk. There were so many experts in Jianghu, but there weren't many who could be as open-minded as Master Tan Yuan. This was also because Master Tan Yuan really didn't have the time. Otherwise, he would definitely find a suitable person to hand over all the things he had on him. At this moment, Fang Qishao also became serious for once. He put the sword back on his back and bowed to Master Tam Yuan. Thank you, Master. After a pause, Fang Qishao added, I dare not forget your kindness in teaching me. I'll go with you to send you on your last journey, Master. Master Tam Yuan did not stop him. He just nodded and said, That's good too. The more the merrier. I didn't expect so many people to send me off before I die. Master Tam Yuan's hometown was Songping Prefecture in eastern Qi's Changyang County. It was located in the hinterland of eastern Qi and was more than 10 days away from Donghai County. And now, Master Tam Yuan's body was about to decay. He might not even be able to hold on for more than 20 hours, let alone 10 days. But perhaps Master Tam Yuan's obsession to see his hometown again, Master Tam Yuan managed to hold on for more than 10 days. Finally, he arrived at a dilapidated temple outside Songping Prefecture, Xuanji Temple. Xuanji Temple was just a small temple. Even when Master Tam Yuan was still alive, there were only a dozen monks in Xuanji Temple. But now, all the monks had left, and there was not a single person left. It was either destroyed, or the temple had no successor and had completely withered. But looking at the well-preserved appearance of the temple, it should be the latter. Touching the dusty Buddha statue in Xuanji Temple, Master Tam Yuan let out a long sigh. He traveled to the east in his middle age and returned at the end of his life. He had experienced countless storms. For Master Tam Yuan, he had experienced hardships and confusion in his life, but he had never regretted it. When he first came to the East Sea, he might have only wanted to spread Buddhism and promote the name of Buddhism. But in the end, those superficial meanings disappeared. Everything Master Tam Yuan did had nothing to do with Buddhism. It was just his belief. Sitting on the dirty futon in front of the Buddha statue, Master Tam Yuan closed his eyes. In an instant, the 7-colored light of Buddha shrouded Master Tam Yuan. A majestic power bloomed and drifted between heaven and earth, as if Master Tam Yuan had really become a Buddha. But at this time, Long Tianying's eyes were red. Fang Qishao and Chu Xiu were also silent. This was not becoming a Buddha, but returning to the dust. Warriors were born between heaven and earth and refined the qi of heaven and earth into their bodies. Now that they had passed away, this power naturally had to be returned to heaven and earth. In the 69th year of Yonghe in eastern Qi, holy monk Tan Yuan passed away in Xuanji Temple in Songping Prefecture. He was born here and died here. Chapter 476. After Master Tam Yuan passed away, it was Chu Xiu and the others who buried Master Tam Yuan. Generally speaking, the martial artists of the Great Guangming Temple were used to leaving behind saraira after they passed away. Not only did they want to be worshipped by their descendants, but they also wanted to integrate their own strength into the saraira, so that they could use the last bit of strength for their disciples. Tan Yuan did not have a disciple. Although Chu Xiu and Fang Qi Shao had received Master Tam Yuan's cultivation method, it could only be considered as teaching and not preaching. Therefore, Master Tam Yuan did not leave behind any saraira, but directly dispersed all the strength in his body, returning to the Eastern Sea. After Long Tianyin completed the funeral and grief, he cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu and Fang Qi Shao and said, "Young hero Fang, young Master Chu, I have already completed the task of sending Master Tam Yuan home. Next, I will return to the Eastern Sea. The two of you will take your leave." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Take care, President Long. In the future, if there is anything you need from me, Chu Xiu, please do not hesitate to ask. If I can help, I will absolutely not decline." Long Tianyin was a person who valued friendship. This was something that Chu Xiu could see. Of course, Chu Xiu wanted to make friends with Long Tianyin not only because he valued friendship, but also because Long Tianyin had the ability, which might be useful in the future. Although the cetacean society was far away in the overseas land, they still had to trade with the Central Plains. Not to mention their strength, but their financial strength was not weak. Long Tianyin thanked Chu Xiu and directly left. He had a good impression of Chu Xiu. At least, Chu Xiu did not turn his back on him after obtaining the power of inheritance. He was not as unbearable as the rumors of Jianghu made him out to be. But even so, Long Tianyin would only befriend Chu Xiu instead of helping Master Tam Yuan for free. Chu Xiu was only the successor of Master Tam Yuan's cultivation method, not Master Tam Yuan's disciple. Therefore, with the death of Master Tam Yuan, the kindness of the past naturally ended, and it was impossible for it to be passed on to Chu Xiu. After Long Tianyin left, looking at Master Tam Yuan's grave in front of him, Fang Qi Shao suddenly sighed and said with a rare serious expression, "Brother Chu, what do you think people live for?" I felt that Master Tam Yuan was at a disadvantage. It's not a problem for an expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm to live for more than 400 years. But now, Master Tam Yuan is only 100 years old, and he's already buried. Is it worth it to exchange his 300 years of lifespan for the lives of those people? If he didn't die, he might be able to save more people. Chu Xiu looked ahead, narrowed his eyes and said, "Sometimes, accounts can't be calculated like this. Only when you have a thought in your heart can you achieve something. 10,000 years is too long, and some people would rather seize the day." For Master Tam Yuan, he didn't regret what he did in the past 100 years. It was worth it. If you ask people what they live for, everyone's answer is different. But if they die without regrets, then it's worth it. What about you? Have you thought clearly about what you live for in this life? Fang Qi Shao was stunned by Chu Xiu's question. He looked at the sword in his hand without blinking. The usually talkative Fang Qi Shao was actually silent for a long time. After a quarter of an hour, Fang Qi Shao faintly said, "What do I live for? I should be living for the sake of living. Do you feel that I talk a lot?" Chu Xiu didn't speak. Fang Qi Shao didn't talk a lot, but he talked a lot. But Fang Qi Shao didn't wait for Chu Xiu to answer and continued, "I talk a lot every day, even to the point that my senior brothers and junior brothers in Sword King City are impatient. That's because I'm afraid. I'm afraid that one day I'll die and I won't be able to talk so much. In fact, I was very miserable when I was young, so miserable that I almost didn't have the chance to talk. You know the Western regions. Big countries are at war, small countries are at war, and bandits are everywhere. When I was 5 years old, my village was slaughtered by bandits. I hid in a water jar and escaped everything. Later, the bandits left, but I still didn't dare to come out of the water jar. It wasn't until 3 days later when I couldn't stand the hunger anymore that I crawled out. But no one in the entire village could talk. That was the first time I was so close to death. Since then, I didn't like the darkness and silence. As long as I can bathe in the sunlight every day and live, I'm satisfied. Chu Xiu looked at Feng Qixiao with a surprised expression. If Feng Qixiao hadn't told him these secrets, only a few people in the pugilistic world would know that his background was so miserable. Similarly, Feng Qixiao's requirements were also so low. Most of the martial artists in the pugilistic world fought for fame and fortune. But ever since Chu Xiu met Feng Qixiao, he didn't care much about fame and fortune. But now, Chu Xiu knew that it wasn't that Feng Qixiao didn't care about fame and fortune, but that in his heart, nothing was more important than living. Only those who had experienced death knew the value of living. In the great terror between life and death, some things were not so important. When he said these things, Feng Qixiao's tone didn't contain any sadness, as if he was just narrating a simple story. After that, Feng Qixiao smiled at Chu Xiu and said, "Brother Chu, when you asked me these questions just now, I told you all my secrets. What about you? What are you living for in this life?" After thinking for a moment, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "If someone told you from the beginning that your fate was already predestined, would you accept it or resist it?" Feng Qixiao was stunned and said, "Are you kidding me? Nothing in this world is predestined from the beginning. If fate really can't be changed, then what's the point of studying the divination masters of Taoism and Buddhism? Anyway, I'm going to die, so I'll just follow fate. Even martial artists like us, if everything is really predestined, then what's the point of cultivating? Find a divination master to tell your fortune. If you don't have any achievements in the future, then no matter how much you cultivate, it'll be a waste of time." Chu Xiu said softly, "Yes, nothing in this world is predestined from the beginning. The saying that man can conquer nature is very cliché. Although no one says it out loud, everyone still does it. You ask me what I'm living for in this life. Even I can't explain it clearly. I just don't want to be imprisoned by fate. I just want to stand at the peak and see the scenery below." Feng Qixiao raised his eyebrows and said, "How high is the peak?" Chu Xiu stared at Feng Qixiao and said in a deep voice, very high, so high that no one can stand higher than me." Feng Qixiao also stared at Chu Xiu. He finally realized that he and Chu Xiu were really two different kinds of people. Chu Xiu's ambition was bigger than others could imagine. However, right at this moment, 7th young Master Feng revealed a trace of a smile and broke the heavy atmosphere. He chuckled and said, "Brother Chu, the higher you stand, the more miserable your fall will be. You have to consider this carefully." Chu Xiu said lightly, "Falling from the peak is not scary. What's scary is that you don't even have the qualifications to stand at the peak and fall." Feng Qixiao shrugged his shoulders. Although he spoke more than Chu Xiu, it was a pity that he didn't know how to respond to Chu Xiu's words. "That's right, Brother Chu, after you bury Master Tam Yuan, are you preparing to return to the Guanzhong torture room?" Feng Qixiao changed the topic and asked. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "The Guanzhong torture room is fine for now. I've already come out, so I'm not in a rush to go back. I'm preparing to go to West Chu to see a friend before returning to the Guanzhong torture room." The plan to go to West Chu was something Chu Xiu had thought about on the way here. Simply put, he was going to West Chu for Lu Fengxian. But Chu Xiu was going to find Lu Fengxian, not just to catch up with Lu Fengxian, but rather to help Lu Fengxian obtain the ancient demon god Lu Wenho's inheritance. In the original plot, the place where Lu Fengxian obtained the inheritance was in West Chu, around this time period. Although there was Chu Xiu's interference and Lu Fengxian still returned to West Chu, whether or not he would come was still a variable. Therefore, Chu Xiu, who had just said that man could conquer nature, was now hoping that the future had not changed. Of course it was not a big deal even if it changed. With the power that Chu Xiu had now, in his previous life, Lu Fengxian could rely on herself to obtain Lu Wenho's inheritance. Now with Chu Xiu's help, the chances were much higher. Those famous characters in the future, they either climbed up step by step, or they obtained some kind of opportunity and directly soared into the sky, becoming a dragon. Lu Fengxian's opportunity to become a dragon was in Lu Wenho's inheritance. Of course, even if Lu Fengxian did not have this inheritance, his strength was not weak enough to compete with the disciples of those large sections. Only cultivation methods were an innate factor. The further one went, the greater the gap would be. If Lu Fengxian could obtain Lu Wenho's inheritance, then this gap would be completely closed. There were very few people who used halberd as a weapon in Jianghu, and those who could use halberd to its peak were even fewer. It could be said that Lu Wenho's inheritance was simply prepared for Lu Fengxian. Even if others obtained it, they would not be able to use it to its fullest potential. When Fang Qishao heard Chu Xiu say this, he suddenly smiled and said, "Brother Chu, how about I come with you? You can go to West Chu to see your friends, and I will also go to West Chu to see the High Hill Dong family's mountain opening ceremony and join in on the fun." Chu Xiu had a strange look in his eyes when he heard this. Lu Wenho's inheritance was found during the mountain opening ceremony. The so-called mountain opening ceremony was a tradition of the West Chu 10,000 mountains. Most of the West Chu lands were surrounded by wild forests, so some sects or families that lived in the mountains would organize people to cut down forests and open up a part of the forest. In the West Chu 10,000 Great Mountains, there was no telling what kind of danger they would encounter, fierce beasts, or even some unexpected things. So every family would hold a ceremony before they started cutting the forest, commonly known as the mountain opening ceremony. It could be considered a special feature of West Chu. Chapter 477. The opening mountain ceremony was a tradition in West Chu. Basically, all the forces that were close to the 100,000 mountains would do this before they started cutting forests. In fact, it was just a ceremony for peace of mind. In fact, if one wanted to be safe, it was better to take some incense money and ask for a talisman formation from the Daoist master mansion in Longhu Mountain, or go to the Great Light Temple to ask for a magic weapon that had been blessed by the Buddha's light. However, this was a ceremony for those small forces, but for the Jianghu Dong family, one of the 9 great families, the scale of the opening mountain ceremony was not ordinary, and the interval was very long. It had been over 10 years since the last time the Dong clan held the opening ceremony. During this period of time, the strength of the Dong clan hadn't changed much. Therefore, the Dong clan was preparing to cut down trees and take a gamble. The Dong family, one of the 9 great families, wanted to cut forests, and the scale was not ordinary. It was not something that those small forces could compare to. Moreover, the Dong family would also invite some martial artists who were on good terms to participate and explore a certain area in the 100,000 mountains together. This kind of behavior was similar to gambling. No one knew what was in the deep mountains and dense forests. If they were lucky, they could find some minerals that could bring some profits to the family, or they could find some precious elixirs that could increase the family's strength. The best case was if they found ancient ruins, then the family's power would definitely skyrocket. However, this was only when they were lucky. If they were unlucky, then there was no telling what they would encounter. It would be fine if they encountered evil beasts. For existences like the Jianghu Dong family, they could deal with most of the evil beasts. Even if they could not deal with them, they could just look for reinforcements. This was not the ancient times, when ferocious beasts were everywhere and ate people. Nowadays, ferocious beasts were like a moving treasure trove for martial artists. Every part of their bodies was a treasure. What was really difficult was something that one could not predict. For example, the Jianghu Dong family had once mistakenly entered a huge ancient killing formation, causing the killing formation to activate. It killed half of the Jianghu Dong family of that generation, and even the martial arts master did not manage to escape. Also, the Jianghu Dong family had once brought a strange thing out of the 100,000 mountains. No one knew what it was, but the Jianghu Dong family had to sacrifice hundreds of lives to get rid of it. Therefore, cutting down forests in the mountains was actually a gamble. Although it was said that one relied on the mountains to survive, the things in the mountains were not easy to deal with. In this generation, the Jianghu clan's strength was considered decent among the 9 great clans. Although they were not the top clans, they were at least in the middle. That was why the Dong clan had the intention to take the risk and conquer the mountains and forests. Now that they had found something good, their strength would increase greatly. Even if they encountered any trouble, the Highland Dong clan would be able to handle it with their current strength. However, according to what Chu Xiu knew, this time, the Jianghu clan had indeed found something good, but they had also encountered a huge problem. Moreover, that good thing belonged to Lu Fengxian, not the Jianghu clan. Moreover, even if the Jianghu clan obtained LV Wenho's inheritance, it would be useless. The Jianghu clan's martial arts were completely different from LV Wenho's martial arts. Be it the demon god's unparalleled halberd or the 9 heavens fiend golden body, they could not cultivate either, unless the entire Dong clan gave up on their own martial arts and cultivated something else. Chu Xiu was also not interested in the demon god's unparalleled halberd. He had practiced his saber skills for too long. If he changed to another weapon, not only would it be awkward, the effort he put in would not be worth the rewards. However, Chu Xiu was very interested in the demon god's unparalleled halberd. This cultivation technique was originally evaluated to be above the 9 heavens fiend golden body. Because the only person who cultivated it was Lu Fengxian, some details were not clear, so the evaluation of the cultivation technique was based on the lowest. Even this kind of cultivation technique had as many as the 9 heavens fiend golden body. It was most likely to be a supreme cultivation technique or a peerless cultivation technique. In the battle with Zhongxian, Chu Xiu also felt that although his strength was strong, he was not the strongest existence in the same realm. In the past, it was Chu Xiu who used his strength to crush others. However, when he encountered a martial artist like Zhongxian who specialized in physical strength, Chu Xiu was easily crushed by him. Although Chu Xiu didn't plan to walk the same path as Zhongxian, for the current Chu Xiu, it would be perfect to develop himself to the point where there were no shortcomings or loopholes. After deciding to go to West Chu, Fang Qishao also wanted to follow, and Chu Xiu did not stop him. One of the 9 great families, the Jianghu family, was going to hold the mountain opening ceremony. The Dong family invited countless people to come and watch the show, so Fang Qishao was not one of them. Chu Xiu planned to win in the chaos, and did not plan to attack by force. However, after Chu Xiu and Fang Qishao left Peace Pine Mansion, Chu Xiu discovered that the news about him had once again spread in the martial world. It was not because he had obtained Master Tam Yuan's inheritance, but because Chu Xiu had stepped into the Longhu ranking's 5th place. Although Master Tam Yuan was a holy monk, he was not famous for his martial arts. Therefore, in the Central Plains, people only knew that Master Tam Yuan was virtuous and was a good person. They knew what Master Tam Yuan had done, so no one cared about Master Tam Yuan's true strength. However, the battle between Chu Xiu and Zhongxian was quite eye-catching. No one expected that Chu Xiu could fight Zhongxian to such an extent. Although the battle was interrupted by Master Tam Yuan, everyone could at least confirm that Chu Xiu had the strength to fight Zhongxian. However, no one knew how far the battle would go. However, based on the strength that Chu Xiu had displayed in that battle, Wind's Sweeping Tower had raised Chu Xiu's ranking by 1 place. He had squeezed out Ing Bailu of the Shangshui clan to become the 5th place on the Longhu ranking. In the Longhu ranking, the top 10 had always been a level, and the top 5 had been another level. Although the Longhu ranking could not include all the young talents in the world, it at least represented that Chu Xiu was standing at the peak of the younger generation in the martial world. Of course, there were also many people in the martial world who complained about Ing Bailu. They believed that even if Chu Xiu had stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, even if he could fight Zhongxian for such a long time, he was definitely not as good as Ing Bailu. They believed that Wind's Sweeping Tower's ranking was unfair. Of course, most of the people who did this were women, and young women at that. If one were to talk about who had the best luck with women in the martial world, it would definitely be Ing Bailu. He was strong, had an illustrious family background, was handsome, and was well versed in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Most importantly, Ing Bailu was not dissolute. There were rumors in the martial world that Ing Bailu was in love with the cloud sword fairy of the Yu Palace, Yan Fian. His infatuation had not changed even after so many years. How could such an outstanding and infatuated man not attract women? However, Wind's Sweeping Tower was one of the 6 sects, and the top 5 of the Longhu ranking were very serious. Of course, they would not listen to a group of women and change the ranking. They directly pretended that they did not hear anything. As for Chu Xiu, because he had squeezed out Ing Bailu's ranking, he had inexplicably made a bunch of enemies. The Xiangshui clan did not say anything, but a lot of women in the martial world were very hostile towards him. At that moment, in a study room of the Xiangshui clan, Ing Bailu held a brush in his hand and was sketching a beauty with his eyes closed. He did not open his eyes because he was showing off his perception, but because the beauty he wanted to draw was not in his eyes, but in his heart. At this moment, the door was pushed open and the martial grandmaster level servant of the Ing clan, Uncle Fu, walked in. Just as he was about to say something, Ing Bailu waved his hand lightly. Uncle Fu immediately understood what was going on and stood quietly to the side. Ing Bailu was leisurely sketching the figure under his brush. She was dressed in a rainbow-colored feather robe, dancing with a sword in her hand, like a fairy from the 9 heavens. Ing Bailu was drawing Yan Fian. After he was done, Ing Bailu looked at his drawing, but shook his head in dissatisfaction. He stretched out his hand and a faint golden energy burst out, directly crushing the drawing to dust. Ordinary paper and brush could not draw the fairy's face. Uncle Fu, did something happen? Or did that white tiger kid cause trouble again? Ing Bailu asked softly. Uncle Fu hurriedly said, It's not about second young master. Eldest young master, have you heard about the rumors in the pugilistic world? Chu Xiu obtained holy monk Tan Yuan's inheritance and fought with Zhong Xian of the Great Light Temple. This also caused Wind's Sweeping Tower to move Chu Xiu's ranking on the Longhu leaderboard by 1 place, pushing you down. Ing Bailu nodded indifferently and said, I know. Uncle Fu was taken aback, then said, Then eldest young master, are you prepared? Ing Bailu waved his hand casually and said, I'm not prepared. It's just a ranking on the Longhu leaderboard. Why should I care so much? I'm ranked 5th, and I'm Ing Bailu. I'm ranked 1st, and I'm still Ing Bailu. Will anyone in the pugilistic world look down on me just because I'm ranked 6th? Uncle Fu, you know me. I don't care about these rankings. If I did, I would have challenged Fang Qi Shao and Zhong Xian a long time ago. There's no need to mention these things anymore. Outsiders can say whatever they want. Uncle Fu nodded. The eldest young master's breadth of mind was indeed not something an ordinary person could compare to. These things might be a big deal to other young martial artists, but to Ing Bailu, it was really not a big deal. Just as Uncle Fu was about to leave, Ing Bailu suddenly said, Wait, Uncle Fu. There's something you need to tell father. I'm going to West Chu. Uncle Fu said in surprise, Eldest young master, why are you going to West Chu? Also, why don't you tell the patriarch yourself? Ing Bailu said indifferently, the Hai Hill Dong family is about to prepare for the mountain opening ceremony. Miss Yen will be representing the Yu Palace to attend the ceremony. Although the Dong family didn't invite me this time, I'm also going. Father doesn't like me being too close to Miss Yen. You should know this. If I tell him, it'll be hard to avoid an argument with father. I don't want to have these meaningless arguments, so you should tell father. Chapter 478. Everyone in the pugilistic world knew that Ing Bailu was in love with Yan Fian, but they didn't know if it was true or just a rumor. However, everyone in the Xiangshui clan knew it was true. Because of this, Ing Bailu had even quarreled with his father several times. In fact, in terms of their family backgrounds, strength, and so on, Yan Fian and Ing Bailu could be considered a match made in heaven. If Ing Bailu wanted to marry Yan Fian, the Ing clan of Xiangshui would do everything in their power to play matchmaker. However, the problem was that Yan Fian was a disciple of the Yu Palace and the future successor of the Yu Palace. She was destined to become the palace master of the Yunu Palace. The rule of the Yunu Palace was that women were not allowed to marry outside, let alone the palace master. Even if the other party was Ing Bailu from the Xianxia clan, it was still the same. Therefore, in the Xianxia clan, whether it was Ing Bailu's father or the other elders, they all advised Ing Bailu to change his target. Even if Ing Bailu wanted to marry the moon-worshipping cult saintess, it would be easier than marrying Yan Fian. There was no need to waste time and energy on her. But who knew that Ing Bailu, who had always appeared to be very rational, would be extremely stubborn when it came to the matter of Yan Fian. No matter who tried to persuade him, it was useless. Even now, Ing Bailu had no intention of changing his mind. Uncle Fu hesitated. Young master, it really is impossible for you and Miss Yen. Even if the patriarch agrees, what will the Yunu Palace say? Not to mention that Miss Yen has already rejected you several times. Ing Bailu didn't care and waved his hand. Everything will sort itself out. There will always be a solution. Uncle Fu, I'll be leaving first. I'll have to trouble you to inform my father. As soon as he finished speaking, Ing Bailu turned around and left without giving Uncle Fu a chance to speak. Looking at Ing Bailu's back, Uncle Fu shook his head. Perhaps there was nothing perfect in this world. The young master was good at everything, but he couldn't see through the word love. It was fate's joke. At this time, in the West Chu territory, Chu Xiu and Fang Qishao directly arrived at West Chu through a small path in the southwest. As for why he wanted to go to the southwest, it was purely because Chu Xiu wanted to see what the southwest had become. The result was just as Chu Xiu had expected. There were still some capable people under the second prince's command, and they managed the southwest in an orderly manner. As for what the martial arts sects in the southwest were thinking, Chu Xiu did not know. In any case, no matter how miserable they were, it was still better than being destroyed, wasn't it? After arriving at West Chu, Fang Qishao cupped his hands to Chu Xiu and said, "Brother Chu will be leaving. You can go find your friend, I'll be going to the Jianghu family to eat." Seventh young master Fang really meant what he said when he said that he was going to make a living because the Jianghu family did not invite Sword King City. However, the Sword King City did not have any enmity with the Jianghu family. With the Sword King City's strength and Fang Qishao's identity, even if he did not receive an invitation, he would still receive preferential treatment from the Jianghu family. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "It's fine, I believe we will meet soon." Fang Qishao was stunned. Chu Xiu was also going to the Jianghu family to participate in the opening ceremony. However, before he could ask more, Chu Xiu had already left. This made Fang Qishao shake his head, and after muttering a few words, he also turned around and left. Chu Xiu would go to the Jianghu family's opening ceremony, but before that, he had to find Lu Fengxian. Speaking of the Jianghu family, Chu Xiu had come into contact with the second eldest of the Jiangdong five heroes, Dong Xiangyi. Although in theory, Dong Xiangyi was not killed by Chu Xiu, but by the internal strife of the Jiangdong five heroes, Chu Xiu could not escape from it. Chu Xiu only hoped that this time when he went to the Jiangdong family, he would not get into trouble because of this matter. However, according to Chu Xiu's analysis, there should not be any trouble. Dong Xiangyi had left the Jiangdong family because he had lost in the family power struggle, so he left in a huff. Now, there were probably only a few people in the Dong family who still remembered Dong Xiangyi, let alone trouble Chu Xiu because of him. At this time, Lu Fengxian should be with Feng Buping, the divine doctor of Jianghu in West Chu, Angry Yama. Feng Buping's medical center was in a valley in Danyang County of West Chu, and he was quite famous in Jianghu. Chu Xiu casually asked around and knew where he was going. It was Chu Xiu's first time coming to West Chu. Among the three countries in the world, Eastern Qi occupied the Central Plains, which was the most prosperous and rich. Although Northern Yen was close to the extreme cold in the north, it was not bad. Moreover, the people were fierce and martial arts were popular, which was enough to compete with Eastern Qi, and it would be like this in the future. As for West Chu, it was the weakest of the three countries, and it had the smallest population. Even most of West Chu's territory was covered by barren mountains and dense forests, and there were very few large-scale counties and prefectures. When he was in eastern Qi and northern Yan, Chu Xiu could just walk on the main road to get to a place quickly, but now that he was in West Chu, he had to go back and forth between small roads, which was very tiring. There were some places where there was not even a proper road. No wonder so many forces in West Chu had the habit of cutting down forests. For them, the surrounding forests were not only a resource, but also a hindrance. Perhaps only the Miao Borders moon-worshipping cult or Dragon Tiger Mountain Celestial Master Mansion would have the courage to establish a sect in the remote mountains and forests, not afraid of any fierce beasts. It should be said that even fierce beasts would have to hide from them. Feng Buping's medical center was in the Danyang County's Dead Man Valley. The name was very inauspicious, but in fact, it was not a good place. It was said that this Dead Man Valley was the place where a small family used to live, but that family was massacred and the valley was filled with blood, so this place was called the Dead Man Valley. Later, the Dead Man Valley was shrouded in miasma all day long. Ordinary people and animals would have a hard time coming out, even martial artists below Xiantian would have a hard time resisting this miasma, so this place was abandoned. But 10 years ago, when Feng Buping came here, he relied on his medical skills to plant all kinds of exotic flowers and rare herbs here. Not only did he make the miasma disappear, but he also made a name for himself, making the name of Angry Yama resound in Jianghu. When Chu Xiu arrived at the Dead Man Valley, this place was not desolate at all, but it was very lively. Most of the martial artists coming and going were here to find Feng Buping for treatment, and there were also some who were simply here to buy medicine. Before Chu Xiu could enter the valley, a short and thin martial artist squeezed his way over and smiled as he cupped his hands and said, "This young master is also here to find Divine Dr. Feng for treatment." However, Divine Dr. Feng's reputation in the world of martial arts is very big. These people are all here to find him for treatment, and the longest queue is already a year later. However, this little one has been staying outside the Dead Man Valley for several years, and I am familiar with Divine Dr. Feng's character. If this young master can take out a little money, I will tell you Divine Dr. Feng's preferences, and guarantee that the consultation fee you take out will be recognized by Divine Dr. Feng. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Guarantee that I will get treatment immediately?" The martial artist immediately shook his head and said, "Of course not, you still have to queue up, but if the thing you take out is not to Divine Dr. Feng's liking, then you don't even have the qualifications to queue up." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. This Feng Buping is really popular to this point, even queuing up depends on his mood. Thinking so, Chu Xiu ignored the martial artist and directly entered the Dead Man Valley. Seeing Chu Xiu's attitude, the martial artist couldn't help but sneer, "So it turns out to be a poor ghost. Wait until you eat a loss, then you will regret it." There are many people outside the Dead Man Valley, but there are even more people inside, and most of them are seriously injured to a certain extent. Feng Buping's price is not low, and the conditions are harsh, so as long as there is a little hope, most of the martial artists will not come to find him. At the end of the Dead Man Valley are several thatched huts, surrounded by all kinds of strange flowers and plants. One of them is a thin middle-aged man, only at the 5 Qis origin realm, with 2 strokes of mustache, dressed in a sloppy manner, sitting in front of the thatched hut. When someone comes, he will carefully examine the other party. Those who need to do something will do it, those who need to take medicine, he will directly prescribe a few doses of medicine, and then throw it to the side of the errand boy for them to deal with. Although his attitude is not good, his actions are very swift. This person is the Angry Yama Feng Buping, known as the Divine Doctor who can snatch people from the hands of the Yama King. Feng Buping's strength is not strong, and Chu Xiu knows that for Feng Buping, he doesn't need much strength in his line of work. At least, he needs to use strength in places where it is less than the refiners. Of course, don't look at Feng Buping's weak strength, his status is there. Among the martial artists who come to treat, there are some from some big sects or some who are at the unity of the heaven and man realm, but they are still reprimanded by Feng Buping like a grandson, not even daring to refute. Just as Chu Xiu wants to directly walk in front of Feng Buping, some martial artists look at Chu Xiu with a somewhat unfriendly gaze. They have been queuing here for a long time, and some even live outside the Dead Man Valley, waiting for their turn according to the order. In the end, this kid actually wants to cut the line. This is breaking the rules. Therefore, a temperamental martial artist who is at the unity of the heaven and man realm couldn't help but stand up and say, "Hey, kid, do you know what the rules are?" Chu Xiu glanced at him, and the aura of the unity of the heaven and man realm slowly bloomed out. It gradually rose, getting stronger and stronger. Finally, the demonic aura and murderous aura seemed to condense into a substance, abnormally terrifying. The martial artist who is at the unity of the heaven and man realm swallowed a mouthful of saliva, turned around, and went back to his position. He didn't even dare to let out a fart. Putting aside the horrifying aura, although he didn't know Chu Xiu, such a young unity of the heaven and man realm martial artist, needless to say, the background of such a background must be shocking. Finding trouble with such a person is simply courting death. Chapter 479. Chu Xiu walked straight towards Feng Buping. This caused Feng Buping to frown, then he coldly snorted and said, "Brat, no matter which sect you come from, since you're here, you must abide by my rules. If you want to cure me, then take out a satisfactory consultation fee and then scram to the back of the queue." Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Dr. Feng, don't be so agitated. Do I look like I'm sick? I'm here to look for someone." Feng Buping glanced at Chu Xiu. With just one glance, Chu Xiu felt as if his entire body was being seen through. This was a very strange feeling. There was no danger at all. Therefore, Chu Xiu didn't even subconsciously resist. When Chu Xiu wanted to mobilize the qi in his body, the feeling disappeared in an instant. Feng Buping nodded and said, "That's right, your qi and blood are strong, and your qi is deep. You're as strong as a flood dragon. There's nothing wrong with you. Who are you looking for?" At this time, Lu Fengxian came out from the back and saw Chu Xiu. He was pleasantly surprised and said, "Brother Chu, why are you here?" Feng Buping looked at Chu Xiu in surprise and said, "You're Chu Xiu." Feng Buping and Lu Fengxian were close friends. Naturally, he knew about Chu Xiu's existence. Among the top 10 of the Dragon and Tiger list, there weren't many martial artists who came from the bottom. For Chu Xiu to be ranked 5th, this was already a legend. Chu Xiu cupped his hands towards Feng Buping and said, "Yes, I came to pay a visit. I hope Dr. Feng doesn't take offense." After saying that, Chu Xiu turned to Lu Fengxian and said, "Of course there's a good thing that I'm looking for you. Moreover, it's a very good thing." Feng Buping knew that the two of them might have something to say, so he waved his hand and said, "You two go inside and talk. I'm very busy here, don't worry about me." Following Lu Fengxian to the back room, Lu Fengxian smiled and said, "Brother Chu, what good news do you have for me? Could it be that Brother Chu has become the successor of the Guanzhong torture room and is looking for me to be the torturer?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "You rejected Qinqingdi's offer to take you into the World Alliance. How could you fancy the Guanzhong torture room? I came to find you because I'm prepared to seize an opportunity together. There's a cultivation technique inside that is very suitable for you. It should be said that it was prepared for you." Lu Fengxian asked directly, "When?" Lu Fengxian was a trusting person, but he wasn't a fool. Even if he trusted someone, there was a degree of trust. If it was someone else, Lu Fengxian wouldn't refuse. However, he would ask in detail what the opportunity was, how dangerous it was, how the other party knew about it, and so on. But facing Chu Xiu, Lu Fengxian knew that Chu Xiu wouldn't harm him, so he only needed time to prepare. And because Chu Xiu knew Lu Fengxian's character, he didn't make up any excuses, because he knew that Lu Fengxian wouldn't ask too many questions. There's still time. 1 month later, the Jialing Dong family's mountain opening ceremony will be held. We can enter with the Dong family. By the way, Brother Lu, how are your injuries? LV Fengxian stretched her body and said, "Divine Physician Feng's miraculous hands can bring me back to life. My injuries can only be healed with time if placed elsewhere, but in Divine Physician Feng's hands, I have fully recovered in a month." Chu Xiu felt strange and asked, then why are you still here? LV Fengxian shook her head and said, I am only here to protect Divine Dr. Feng. Divine Dr. Feng has not been very peaceful during this period of time. I am here to help him block some thieves. Chu Xiu felt strange and asked, there are still people looking for trouble with Feng Buping? Generally, in the pugilistic world, people like Feng Buping, who could save your life, divination masters, refiners, and the like, although they were weak, very few people would look for trouble with them because it wasn't worth it. As cultivators, these kinds of people posed no threat to them. Moreover, they might have a use for them in the future. Therefore, even the disciples of the big sects had to be polite to these kinds of people. Not to mention looking for trouble, they didn't even have time to curry favor with them. Lu Fengxian smiled bitterly. If it was someone else, it would naturally be the same, but you have seen Divine Dr. Feng's character. Even if he is treating an illness and saving a life, his attitude is still the same, and he would often offend people. This also caused many people to dislike Divine Dr. Feng. Their injuries have been healed, but in their hearts, they do not feel the slightest bit of gratitude towards Divine Dr. Feng. Instead, they hate him. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. He could also see that a doctor who could shout at people to get lost naturally had a bad temper. Of course, this could only be attributed to nature. Mo Yezi's temper was also quite strange. But at least he didn't offend people. Instead, he made a lot of connections. Even if he offended the Luo clan, he wasn't afraid. At this moment, there was a sudden commotion outside. This made Lu Fengxian frown and sigh, it's here again. Chu Xiu was confused, who? Lu Fengxian said helplessly, someone looking for trouble. You can't handle it? Chu Xiu knew Lu Fengxian's strength. Although Lu Fengxian was only at the 5 Qis unification realm, with his strength, he could fight against most of the one with heaven and man martial artists. Could it be that the person looking for trouble was a martial Dao grandmaster? Lu Fengxian shook her head and said, I can handle it, but that guy's background is a little big. Someone from the top forces in the pugilistic world? Chu Xiu asked. Not a top force, but his master is a martial Dao grandmaster who cultivates alone. He's the youngest disciple. Hearing Lu Fengxian's words, Chu Xiu immediately understood where the problem was. If the other party was a disciple of a top force, then it could be solved through various connections or other methods. But the disciple of a martial Dao grandmaster who cultivates alone was very tricky, because such people usually meant that their master must be a very protective existence. Lu Fengxian sighed and said, even if it's tricky, I have to take care of it. Dr. Feng saved me twice, I can't abandon him. After saying that, Lu Fengxian directly walked out of the door, and Chu Xiu also followed behind her. At this time, outside the door, the herbs that Feng Buping specially planted around him had been trampled and destroyed. Feng Buping's face was gloomy, and he was trembling with anger. A martial artist in his 30s with physical invulnerability cultivation, wearing brocade clothes, looked at Feng Buping and sneered, bullshit Dr. Feng, I think you're a Jianghu swindler. In the beginning, I spent so much money to let you help me sort out the chaotic true qi in my body. You said that you could guarantee that I would be safe and sound and recover to my peak, but in the end? In the end, I still have a hidden injury. Feng Buping, if you don't give me an explanation for this matter, I'll come and smash your Dead Man Valley every few days, and make your medical center completely shut down. Feng Buping said with a gloomy face, what did I tell you at the beginning? After sorting out the true qi, you can't get close to women for a month. It's you who can't control the thing in your crotch, and now you're blaming me? At that time, I was also blind and coveted the purple gold mysterious ginseng that your master gave me. That's why I spent a whole 2 days to help you sort out your true qi. I didn't expect that you would bite the hand that fed you. Well, I don't want that purple gold mysterious ginseng anymore, get out of here. The martial artist sneered and said, you don't want it? Then what about my hidden injury? If I don't cure my hidden injury, this matter won't end. Feng Buping roared angrily, at that time, I said that if you break the precepts to get close to women after sorting out your true qi, you'll have to bear the consequences. Now that your true qi has completely torn apart a part of your dantian, even the gods can't save you. How do you want me to cure it? The martial artist said lightly, if you can't cure it, then use something to compensate. Aren't you known as the divine doctor of Jianghu, Feng Buping? Take out your medical book, I'll let others study how to use it to treat myself. As soon as these words came out, Feng Buping's expression suddenly became extremely unsightly. The others also suddenly realized that the martial artist's goal was actually the medical book in Feng Buping's hands. The medical book in the hands of a divine doctor of Jianghu was definitely very valuable. Moreover, this thing was equivalent to a martial artist's martial arts secret book for a martial artist. How could it be casually handed over? This martial artist was simply trying to take it by force and trickery. Among the people of the Dead Man Valley, some people wanted to stand out. After all, this martial artist was causing trouble here, and it was also delaying their time. However, before they could make a move, they were immediately held down by others, who gave them a detailed explanation of this person's identity. This person was a West Chu rogue cultivator expert, Floating Blood Blade, Xiao Yindong's disciple, Zhou Bai. Xiao Yindong was famous in the West Chu land for being protective. In the early years, he even went to the Celestial Master Mansion to seek justice because of his disciples' grievances with the Celestial Master Mansion. If the people present wanted to stand out, they wouldn't have to face Zhou Bai, but the protective martial arts grandmaster Xiao Yindong. Zhou Bai looked at Feng Buping calmly, as if he had already eaten him. He knew that there weren't many people in West Chu who would help Feng Buping. This person's temper was too bad. Sometimes, even if he helped people cure their injuries, most people wouldn't appreciate his favor. Some rogue cultivators who wanted to help didn't dare to make a move after knowing his identity. Some disciples of the big sects didn't want to offend Xiao Yindong for Feng Buping after knowing his identity. After all, Xiao Yindong was considered a top figure in West Chu. Feng Buping was just a divine doctor. He wasn't the only divine doctor in the entire world. It wasn't worth offending a martial arts grandmaster for him. At this moment, Lu Fengxian walked out and said in a cold voice, Zhou Bai, you've gone too far. If it wasn't for divine Dr. Feng, not to mention internal injuries, you would already be a cripple. Divine Dr. Feng doesn't even want the purple gold profound ginseng, what else do you want? Zhou Bai sneered, little Marquis Lu Fengxian. You're currently in the top 10 of the dragon and tiger ranking. You're quite famous and your future is limitless. I advise you not to get involved in this matter, otherwise you won't want to know the consequences. Lu Fengxian knew how to repay kindness and always stayed by Feng Buping's side. Zhou Bai knew this, but he wasn't afraid. Lu Fengxian was a rogue cultivator and didn't have any background. Moreover, she was chased out of northern Yan after offending the righteous manner, so there was nothing to worry about. Chapter 480. Zhou Bai's threat made Lu Fengxian very angry. Although Lu Fengxian usually appeared to be very kind, in fact, Lu Fengxian was also not a kind person. In the past, when they were being chased by the memorial hall, Lu Fengxian had killed the most people. Even if it was usually to solve a problem, although Lu Fengxian would reason with people most of the time, if reason didn't work, then it was time to use his halberd. But this time, reason was obviously useless. Moreover, Zhou Bai's identity also forced Lu Fengxian not to make a move. If Lu Fengxian was alone, then he would have already split Zhou Bai in half. But now, Feng Buping was still here. If he killed Zhou Bai, then the one who would be implicated would be Feng Buping. Therefore, he couldn't make a move on his own. This kind of matter made Lu Fengxian feel very conflicted. Zhou Bai looked at Lu Fengxian calmly. He knew that Lu Fengxian wouldn't dare to make a move. Therefore, Zhou Bai directly sneered and said, Lu Fengxian, I respect you as a young talent on the Longhu list. I don't want to be your enemy, but you'd better not meddle in my affairs. If you should meddle, do it. If you shouldn't meddle, then don't meddle. At this moment, Chu Xiu glanced at Feng Buping. Suddenly, his heart moved. He directly stood up and said coldly, "A martial artist in the physical invulnerability realm actually has such a big tone. He simply doesn't know his place. Just because your master is a martial arts grandmaster, you can be so arrogant. Didn't your master teach you how to respect your superiors?" Zhou Baiyi's face suddenly sank. He said coldly, "Who are you?" "Chu Xiu." As Chu Xiu said these two words lightly, the people present suddenly burst into an uproar. They had never seen Chu Xiu, but they definitely knew Chu Xiu's name. Last time, when Chu Xiu fought against Zhong Xian, his rank on the dragon and tiger rank had risen to the 5th place. This matter had spread through the entire world of martial arts with the change in wind-sweeping Tower's ranking board, and Chu Xiu's name was once again known by the people. The top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard and the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard were worlds apart. Most importantly, Chu Xiu was different from Lu Fengxian. Lu Fengxian was alone, but Chu Xiu had the Guanzhong torture room behind him. Everyone who knew the inside story knew that although the Guanzhong torture room was very low-key, its strength was not inferior to a peak power. Its hall master, Guan Siyu, was famous in the world of martial arts. Even the Xiahou family's master had suffered under Guan Siyu's hands. Zhou Baiyi was also surprised why Chu Xiu was here, but he seemed to have heard that Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu were good friends. However, Zhou Baiyi didn't care. So what if it was Chu Xiu? This was West Chu, not the Guanzhong torture room. Zhou Baiyi directly said in a cold voice, "The Guanzhong torture room's official Chu? You can show off in the Guanzhong torture room, but in my West Chu, you don't have the qualifications to do so." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I'm not using the identity of the Guanzhong torture room to show off, I just want to tell you one thing. When the weak faces the strong, you must first learn respect. A fox can borrow the tiger's power, a dog can rely on its master's power, but the prerequisite is that there is a tiger behind you and your master by your side. Otherwise, that is seeking death." As soon as his voice fell, a chill suddenly rose from the bottom of Zhou Baiyi's heart. Before Zhou Baiyi could do anything, a profound aura erupted from Chu Xiu's body. Chu Xiu's eyes became like 2 deep pools, and powerful spiritual energy immediately pierced into Zhou Baiyi's mind, taking complete control of his body. This feeling was incomparably terrifying. He clearly had his own consciousness, but his body didn't listen to his orders. It was like his soul had become an outsider. In the back, Lu Fengxian and Feng Buping's expressions changed. Feng Buping didn't know Chu Xiu's personality and Lu Fengxian didn't think Chu Xiu would make a move this suddenly. Lu Fengxian wanted to say something, but Chu Xiu had already made his move. She saw Zhou Baiyi's hand explode with astral energy and hit his own dantian, completely crippling his martial arts. After that, he punched his fists against each other, causing both his arms to shatter and twist. His blood splattered all over the ground. White bones could be seen from Zhou Baiyi's elbow. He maintained a posture of self-mutilation, looking incomparably resolute. However, his eyes were filled with pain and horror. This kind of feeling was extremely evil, and even more so, caused everyone present to shiver even though it wasn't cold. If Chu Xiu had directly crippled Zhou Baiyi, it would have been fine. But now, Chu Xiu had directly sent a glance at him, and Zhou Baiyi had actually directly mutilated himself. This kind of feeling was indeed a little too frightening. After Chu Xiu withdrew the soul-shifting technique, Zhou Baiyi knelt on the ground and let out a mournful howl. It was incomparably terrifying. If Divine Dr. Feng hadn't been there, your cultivation would have been crippled. Now that you know how to be grateful, I will cripple your cultivation. It's fair and reasonable, Chu Xiu said lightly. Zhou Baiyi's gaze towards Chu Xiu was filled with hatred. He didn't say anything and directly turned around to escape. He didn't even dare to say a word. Since Chu Xiu dared to cripple him, naturally, he also dared to kill him. Lu Fengxian sighed behind him and said, "Brother Chu, this is troublesome. Crippling Zhou Baiyi is fine, but his master Qiao Lindong will definitely come to the Dead Man Valley to cause trouble. I'm afraid that Divine Dr. Feng won't be able to stay here any longer." Chu Xiu didn't say anything. In fact, he deliberately crippled Zhou Bai and also deliberately lured Xiao Liandong here. He had no enmity with Feng Buping, so he wouldn't deliberately frame him. Chu Xiu just wanted to bring Feng Buping to the Guanzhong torture room. To be more precise, it should be the Guanxi region. With Feng Buping's character, Chu Xiu also didn't intend to make Feng Buping loyal to him and become his subordinate. However, as long as Feng Buping came to the Guanxi region, for Chu Xiu, it would be enough to greatly increase his power. Therefore, when Chu Xiu heard this, he directly said, "Brother Lu, Divine Dr. Feng, you guys have too many concerns in the past. That's why you can let this kind of villain cause trouble again and again. For these kinds of scoundrels, you can only be more ruthless and evil than them to be able to control them. Otherwise, the one who will suffer will always be you. Divine Dr. Feng doesn't need to worry. If you can't stay in West Chu's Dead Man Valley, the world is so big, there are other places to go. My Guanzhong Punishment Hall is located between the three countries and there are many martial artists from the three countries coming and going. If Divine Dr. Feng is willing to come over, I won't let you suffer in other places. At least in the Guanxi region, I won't let you suffer." Feng Buping's face was gloomy. He sighed and said, "With my character, no matter where I go, I can't avoid offending others. Zhou Bai has repeatedly found trouble with me. I'm afraid that he has already set his eyes on me. This is partly due to his master Xiao Liandong's instructions. If you want to go to the Guanzhong torture room, then go to the Guanzhong torture room. At least you can find a safe place." Actually, even if Chu Xiu didn't do this, Feng Buping still had thoughts of avoiding him. Zhou Bai stirring up trouble every other day had long since made Feng Buping impatient. It was just that Feng Buping was a bit reluctant to part with the various elixirs he had planted in the Dead Man Valley. Now that Chu Xiu had crippled Zhou Bai, he had thoroughly offended Xiao Liandong. This helped him make up his mind to change places. The Guanzhong torture room was not a bad choice. His character was eccentric and he loved to offend people. If he went to the Guanxi region, although he didn't have any friendship with Chu Xiu, Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu had a friendship. He believed that he would be able to live a more stable life in the Guanxi region. This Divine Dr. Feng was actually a kind person. He didn't think about the dark side of Chu Xiu's actions. He thought that Chu Xiu was standing up for him. Feng Buping sighed and cupped his hands towards the other people present and said, "Everyone, I'm afraid that I can't treat everyone anymore. If there's anyone who wants to continue looking for me for treatment, please come to the Guanzhong region." It could be said that this was one of the rare times that Feng Buping spoke to people in a friendly manner. However, the people present were somewhat dissatisfied. They had queued up with great difficulty until now. In the end, they actually had to go to the Guanzhong region to queue up again. This made the people present secretly curse Zhou Bai and his disciple. It was their greed that forced Divine Dr. Feng to leave. In such a big Dead Man Valley, there were many things that belonged to Feng Buping. They were the elixirs that he had planted here. Some of them that couldn't be transplanted were probably left here. As for those that could be taken away, they were picked by Feng Buping's servants. Chu Xiu handed over the Guanxi punishment officer's token to Feng Buping and said, "Divine Dr. Feng, take this token. As long as you go to the Guanxi region, give it to any of the Guanxi branch's constables. They will open the door for you. As for where you want to practice medicine, it all depends on your mood." Feng Buping received the token and nodded to Chu Xiu with a rare polite attitude and said, "Many thanks, Official Chu." After all, in Feng Buping's view, Chu Xiu crippled Zhou Bai to stand up for him. Now that he was willing to give him the token and let him develop in the Guanzhong torture room, he was also helping him. Although Feng Buping's character wasn't good, he still knew that. Just when Feng Buping had finished packing up and was about to leave, a cold and angry voice suddenly came from the entrance of the Dead Man Valley. "You want to leave after crippling my disciple? I'm afraid you're thinking too much." At the entrance of the Dead Man Valley, a middle-aged martial artist wearing a blood-red robe stood there. He was holding a slender miaodao in his hand. The blade was dyed red with blood, making it look a bit evil. Seeing this person, some of the martial artists that hadn't left yet were shocked. Zhou Baiyi's master, floating blood blade, Xiao Yindong, he really came. Moreover, it had only been less than half an hour since Zhou Baiyi had left. This speed was a bit too fast. It was obvious that Xiao Yindong was in the vicinity. It was just that he had not directly interfered in this matter. Those that hadn't left were looking at Chu Xiu and the others with the mentality of watching a show. They were very curious about what Chu Xiu and the others would choose. They definitely wouldn't be able to win if they fought head-on. This was a martial arts master, and even in the West Chu land, Xiao Yindong was a famous expert. Chapter 481. Xiao Yindong looked angrily at Chu Xiu. He couldn't believe that this group of people actually dared to cripple his disciple. Actually, it wasn't Zhou Baiyi's idea to steal Feng Buping's medical manual. It was his idea and Zhou Baiyi didn't have the guts to do so. When he brought Zhou Baiyi for treatment, he hoped that Feng Buping would give him some face and reduce the consultation fee. Moreover, he didn't need to queue up. Unexpectedly, Feng Buping really didn't take him seriously, a martial Dao Grand Master. Not only did he not give him a single cent of the consultation fee, but he also forced him to take out the purple gold mysterious ginseng, which he regarded as a treasure, and even queued for a full month to cure Zhou Baiyi's injury. Although Xiao Yindong was a martial arts master, he wasn't a magnanimous person. From then on, he bore a grudge against Feng Buping. However, he was still a famous person in West Chu's Jianghu. Directly stealing Feng Buping's medical manual was a bit too degrading. Therefore, he was prepared to let his disciple Zhou Baiyi make a move and force Feng Buping to hand over the medical manual. However, he didn't think that this group of people would actually not put him in their eyes and cripple him just like that. Facing a martial arts master, although Feng Buping didn't show any fear on his face, his expression didn't look good either. After all, a doctor was just a doctor. When a martial arts master asked him for help, he was a divine doctor. But when someone wanted to kill him, he was nothing. As for Lu Fengxian, she gripped halberd tightly in her hand and was about to step forward. It wasn't like he hadn't faced a martial arts master before. Even when he was being chased by the morgue, he didn't retreat even half a step. However, just as Lu Fengxian was about to make a move, Chu Xiu already took a step forward and said indifferently, "Senior Qiao, you are a famous martial arts master in West Chu. Now, you are letting your disciple rob you. Is this really good? Or could it be that the person who covets divine Dr. Feng's medical manual is you?" Xiao Yindong said coldly, "I'll be the one to discipline my own disciple. It's not up to you to make a move. Chu Xiu, you are the torture officer of the Guanzhong torture room, but this is West Chu. Even if you have Guan Siyu behind you, you crippled my disciple today. If I let you leave so easily, where would I put my face? You didn't kill my disciple, so I won't kill you today. I'll turn you into the same way you turned my disciple into. I want to see if Feng Buping can cure such a serious injury." For a rogue cultivator like Xiao Yindong, he was not afraid of the Guanzhong torture room. He was an unaffiliated martial artist with no fixed abode. So what if he offended the Guanzhong torture room? The only person who could threaten him in the Guanzhong torture room was Guan Siyu. Could it be that Guan Siyu would ignore the Guanzhong torture room and hunt him down in the pugilistic world? Moreover, Xiao Yindong was a martial arts grandmaster in West Chu. He was a rogue cultivator, so he didn't know many secrets. The Guanzhong torture room was low-key, but he really thought that the Guanzhong torture room wasn't strong and that Guan Siyu's strength wasn't that high. Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and said, "All right, I also want to experience Senior Qiao's strength. It's not like I haven't fought with a martial arts grandmaster before." Hearing this, the crowd was in an uproar. This Chu Xiu really dared to make a move. Did he really think that he was the little celestial master Zhang Qingjin? The pugilistic world was saying that the top 5 talents on the Longhu leaderboard had strength comparable to a martial arts grandmaster, but it was just a rumor. The only one who had the battle record of fighting a martial arts grandmaster was Zhang Qingjin. Now that Chu Xiu had just stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, he dared to challenge Xiao Yindong, a veteran martial arts grandmaster. He was probably overestimating himself. There was also a hint of anger in Xiao Yindong's eyes. He had been famous for a long time, but no one had dared to ignore him like this. Just as Xiao Yindong raised the blood-colored miaodao in his hand, Chu Xiu had already moved. However, it was not his body that moved, but his spirit. In an instant, the soul-extinguishing technique and the mental demon rotation technique were performed to the extreme by Chu Xiu, and his mental strength was also raised to the highest level. With the support of the powerful mental strength, Chu Xiu also performed the heaven's sun gazing at air technique to the extreme. At this moment, Chu Xiu's entire body seemed to have merged with heaven and earth. His eyes were simply impossible to look directly at. Even the others who looked at Chu Xiu had an evil feeling of being stripped naked. Xiao Yindong, who bore the brunt of the attack, was even more so. He could not understand what was going on with Chu Xiu's body, but he had a feeling that the world was under Chu Xiu's control. Martial Arts Grandmaster was just an honorific title in the outside world. In fact, the realm of Martial Dao Grandmaster should be called the Martial Dao True Pellet Realm. It mobilized the power of heaven and earth to refine the Martial Dao True Pellet in the Dantian and communicate with the power of heaven and earth. After swallowing a golden elixir, one would know that one's fate was not up to the heavens. Martial Dao True Pellet was called Niden in Dao sects, and Buddhism also called it Saraira. Only Buddhist masters at the Martial Dao Grandmaster level could condense all the power of their body into Martial Dao True Pellet and turn it into a Saraira. Therefore, in the Martial Dao level, only when one reached the Martial Dao True Pellet realm could they really borrow the power of heaven and earth with the Martial Dao True Pellet, and a casual blow would have the power to change the weather. Simply put, compared with the martial artists at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm, the Martial Dao True Pellet realm grandmasters were closer to heaven and earth. But now facing Chu Xiu, the evil feeling made Xiao Yindong think that he was the one at the Unity of Heaven and Man, and Chu Xiu was the Martial Dao Grandmaster. Everything was controlled by the other party, and that feeling was abnormally awkward. Xiao Yindong let out a cold snort and raised the saber in his hand. However, Chu Xiu took a step forward. This seemingly simple step locked onto Xiao Yindong's qi activity, as if all his subsequent actions had been seen through to the point where he could clearly see through them. Xiao Yindong changed his movement again, and Chu Xiu took another step, and the result was exactly the same. Twice in a row, this made Xiao Yindong's gaze on Chu Xiu have changed a little. He is indeed a hero who can be ranked 5th on the Longhu list when he was born. Can this Chu Xiu really fight against a Martial Dao Grandmaster? Under Chu Xiu's magical heaven sun gazing at air, Xiao Yindong couldn't help but have the intention to retreat. In the past, Xiao Yindong became famous not because of his martial arts, but because he once went to the celestial master mansion of Longhu Mountain to seek justice for his disciple, and he successfully went down the mountain. This made his reputation known to the people in Jianghu, and they all said that Xiao Yindong was tough enough to break into the celestial master mansion for his disciple. In fact, only Xiao Yindong knew the truth of this matter. At that time, he did not have such courage. He just went to Longhu Mountain in a moment of anger, but when he was halfway up, he already regretted it. However, he had already gone up the mountain, and it would be even more embarrassing to go down now. So Xiao Yindong planned to go up the mountain after saying a few words, but he did not expect that the person who received him was not the Martial Dao Grandmaster of Longhu Mountain, but the little celestial master Zhang Qingjin. Seeing that the other party did not even send a Martial Dao Grandmaster, Xiao Yindong was really a little angry, but as he fought with Zhang Qingjin for a few moves, he realized that Longhu Mountain sent Zhang Qingjin to negotiate with him because they were giving him face. Moreover, Zhang Qingjin did not publicize this matter after the incident. Instead, he politely sent him down the mountain. Therefore, outsiders thought that he had successfully gone to the Celestial Master Mansion to seek justice. Although in fact, he had not, he had gained fame because of this. This was the first time Xiao Yindong knew what a real genius was, and what a real hero was. He even felt that he had lived for so long in vain. Not only was Zhang Qingjin's strength extremely strong, but even the way he conducted himself made Xiao Yindong feel ashamed. It was not difficult to defeat one's enemy, but it was difficult to make one's enemy admire one's strength. At this time, facing Chu Xiu, Xiao Yindong was also a little surprised. Although he would not compare Chu Xiu with Zhang Qingjin, he could not guarantee that Chu Xiu would be much weaker than Zhang Qingjin. After all, Wind's Sweeping Tower said that Chu Xiu had once fought with Zhong Xian. Although there was no ending, both sides were evenly matched before the armistice. It was widely recognized that among the younger generation, only Zhong Xian could compete with Zhang Qingjin, so it was really hard to say the strength of Chu Xiu. Holding the saber, Xiao Yindong's eyes flashed with hesitation. He changed the saber momentum several times, but he did not slash out. Because he was not sure. This was not Dragon Tiger Mountain, but the Valley of the Dead with hundreds of people watching. If his saber slash did not do anything to Chu Xiu, even if it was a tie, he would lose all his face. Because he was a martial arts master and Chu Xiu was a junior martial artist. It was because Xiao Yindong was a rogue martial artist that he wanted his reputation. This saber was betting on his reputation. Should he make a move or not? After a while, Xiao Yindong put down the blood-colored miaodao in his hand and said coldly, Chu Xiu, I will not cripple you since we are both from the countryside and it is not easy for you to get to where you are now. Plus, I am giving face to the Guanzhong torture room today. But my disciple has been crippled, this matter is not that easy to resolve. I'll give you 3 days to scram out of West Chu. If I see you again, you won't have such good luck. My breadth of mind is limited. After saying that, Xiao Yindong turned around and left, leaving behind the stunned crowd. Xiao Yindong did not make a move and just left like this. His disciple's enmity was over like this? The West Chu martial artists knew Xiao Yindong's temperament very well. This fellow's breadth of mind was not big, otherwise he would not have repaid kindness with enmity and threatened Feng Buping. But now Xiao Yindong had become so magnanimous. What was this situation? Chapter 482. After Xiao Yindong left, Chu Xiu finally retracted his heaven sun gazing at air state. At the same time, his face was a little pale. The heaven sun gazing at air did not consume true qi, but mental energy and mind. After all, Chu Xiu was not a martial Dao Grand Master. If he wanted to completely see through a martial Dao Grand Master, the price he had to pay was not ordinary. However, in the end, Chu Xiu still succeeded. Xiao Yindong was scared away by him. To be precise, he should be tricked away. In fact, if Xiao Yindong was a little more courageous and directly attacked Chu Xiu, after all, he was a martial Dao Grand Master, and the outcome was still uncertain. The heaven sun gazing at air was not invincible. Just like when Chu Xiu faced Zhong Xian, he could see the flaws in Zhong Xian's body, but in reality, he could not defeat Zhong Xian with those flaws. Speaking of which, Chu Xiu had to thank Zhang Qingjin, whom he had never met. It was because of Zhang Qingjin's previous record that Xiao Yindong was so afraid of Chu Xiu. At this time, Lu Fengxian also noticed that something was wrong with Chu Xiu. He walked over and asked, Brother Chu, are you okay? Before Chu Xiu could say anything, Feng Buping said, Official Chu is fine. He just consumed a little too much mental energy and mind. He will be fine after a period of recuperation. At this point, Feng Buping also looked at Chu Xiu with a strange gaze. Official Chu, the cultivation method you cultivate is really magical. It can actually see through all the qi of the opponent. If it is used in a fight, the power of this cultivation method is quite shocking. Chu Xiu rubbed his head and said, There is no cultivation method in this world that is perfect. To be able to see through the opponent's qi, you have to seize the opportunity. Divine Dr. Feng, your cultivation method is not weak. It can also see through the mystery of the human body. It is very magical. As a divine doctor in the pugilistic world, Feng Buping had his own abilities. He could see the miraculousness of the heaven's sun gazing at air technique at a glance. Moreover, when he had looked at Chu Xiu previously, he had also seen through Chu Xiu's physical condition at a glance. Feng Buping shook his head and said, I'm a doctor. I can only observe the details of the human body based on the flow of qi and blood. It's useless in battle. Xiao Yindong had been scared away by Chu Xiu. Feng Buping was afraid of causing more trouble, so he immediately sent people to bring the things and set off for Guangzhong. Meanwhile, Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian still had to go to Jialing Dong family to participate in the mountain opening ceremony. On the way, Lu Fengxian asked Chu Xiu, "Brother Chu, now that you've stepped into the oneness of heaven and man, do you really have the strength to fight against a martial Dao Grand Master?" Lu Fengxian was still at the 5 Qis collecting in origin. Although his accumulation was deep enough, he had not touched the threshold of the oneness of heaven and man. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Of course not. I haven't really fought against a martial Dao Grand Master. How can I be confident? But now I have the confidence to fight against a weaker martial Dao Grand Master." Lu Fengxian was surprised and said, "Then you still dare to stand out and challenge Xiao Yindong? What if he didn't get scared away by you and directly attacked?" Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "If I can beat him, then I'll fight him. If I can't, then I'm just a fox borrowing the tiger's power to rise." Lu Fengxian was puzzled and asked, "Borrowing the power of whose power?" "Yours." "Mine?" Lu Fengxian's face was full of doubt. He was a rogue cultivator from the wilderness, and his background was not even as big as Chu Xiu's. What power did he have to borrow? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Brother Lu, sometimes you are too rigid. In fact, in the land of West Chu, your foundation is deeper than mine. Many people know that the World Alliance's Qinqing Di appreciates you. Even if you don't plan to join the World Alliance, it is enough to scare people with Qinqing Di. If you had told Zhou Bai about your relationship with Emperor Qinqing Di from the beginning, he wouldn't have dared to come to the Dead Man Valley to look for trouble, even if his master Xiao Yindong was the same. The Celestial Master Mansion is a big Taoist sect. They follow the rules, so they don't want to go too far. That's why Xiao Yindong has the courage to go to Dragon Tiger Mountain. But if it was the World Alliance, Xiao Yindong might not even dare to fart, because although the World Alliance is not as good as Dragon Tiger Mountain, Qinqing Di can directly punch him out." Lu Fengxian shook his head and said, "Since I don't want to join the World Alliance, it is not good to always borrow Senior Chen's name." Chu Xiu also secretly shook his head. Lu Fengxian's character could be said to be honest or stubborn, but he was indeed not flexible. If it was Chu Xiu, as long as he could borrow the power, he would definitely borrow it. On the surface, he borrowed the power of the Guangzhong torture room, and in the dark, he borrowed the power of the Yinma clan. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was unscrupulous. However, Chu Xiu didn't mind. He wasn't a hypocrite, but he was a true villain. In the martial world that was filled with killing intent, it was fine as long as the means were effective. Why would he care about principles and rules? As for Lu Fengxian, even Chu Xiu had to admit that he was lucky. No matter how unlucky he was, he would probably be able to turn misfortune into blessing. Half a month later, Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian had arrived at Jialing County. The opening mountain sacrifice of the Dong family was about to begin, and there were many martial artists in Jialing County. Some were invited by the Dong family, and some came to watch the ceremony. There were many barren mountains and dense forests in the land of West Chu. The Dong family of Jialing was also built on the mountains, but most of them chose to build in places with rich qi of heaven and earth and good feng shui. When Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian walked into the Dong family, 2 disciples who were in charge of welcoming guests asked them politely, "May I ask which sect you are from, and do you have an invitation card?" Generally, when the opening mountain sacrifice was held by a force like the Dong family, they would find some familiar forces to watch the ceremony and explore the dangerous forest together. It could be considered as sharing the risk. Similarly, the participants could keep the good things they found, but the things that they could not take away would be left to the Dong family. However, for those who did not have an invitation card, as long as they did not deliberately come to make trouble, the Dong family would not refuse them. The livelier the opening mountain sacrifice, the better. Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "I am Chu Xiu of the Guangzhong torture room, and this is Little Marquis Wen Lu Fengxian." I have long heard of the Dong family's opening mountain sacrifice, and this time I also want to join in the fun and observe. The eyes of the two guards immediately lit up when they heard this. Unexpectedly, these two were the top 10 geniuses on the Longhu list. He quickly said, "Since you two can come to our Dong family to watch the ceremony, our Dong family naturally welcomes you. Please come with me." After saying this, one of the guards led Chu Xiu to the inner hall. At this time, there were already many people inside the Dong family. Some of the less famous people who came to watch the fun were waiting outside, while those with real backgrounds were sitting in the inner hall. It could not be said that this was the Dong family's force, it should be said that 99% of the big forces would do this. Otherwise, if they treated everyone equally, not only would they not get many good words, but some of the big force's disciples would also be dissatisfied. When Chu Xiu stepped into the inner hall, a voice suddenly rang out, "Hey, Brother Chu, you really came." Chu Xiu looked over and saw Fang Qishao sitting at a table in the corner, drinking wine and chewing peanuts. Fang Qishao had arrived much earlier than Chu Xiu, and he had been freeloading in the Dong family's food and watching the fun. In any case, he was the third genius on the Longhu list, and the future successor of Sword King City. But now, he was alone in a corner, living miserably. One could imagine how many people he had offended during this time. If it was someone like Nie Donglu, it was estimated that he would be sitting in the center, surrounded by people, flattering him. It would definitely be much more lively than Fang Qishao. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "I said that we would meet again at the mountain opening ceremony." Chu Xiu said to Lu Fengxian, "This is Sword King City's sword chief, Fang Qishao, a sword genius ranked third on the Longhu list." Hearing this, Lu Fengxian hurriedly said, "So it is Sword Chief Fang Qishao, I have heard a lot about you." When Lu Fengxian said that he had heard a lot about you, he was not being polite, he really had heard a lot about you. After all, there were only a few people in the Jianghu who did not know the name of Sword Chief Fang Qishao. Chu Xiu then pointed at Lu Fengxian and said, "This is Marquis Wen Xiaolong, Lu Fengxian, ranked 9th on the Longhu list, and a good friend of mine." At this time, Fang Qishao did not greet Lu Fengxian, but looked at Lu Fengxian without blinking, causing Lu Fengxian to have goosebumps all over his body. After a long while, Fang Qishao said gloomily, "Brother Chu, did you bring Brother Lu here to deliberately cause trouble for me?" Lu Fengxian was stunned, he did not remember meeting Fang Qishao, why did it seem like he had something against him? Fang Qishao stared at Lu Fengxian, and said gloomily, "I have always thought that although I can't beat Zhong Xian and Zhang Qingjin, at least in terms of being handsome and suave, I am much better than them. But now that I see Brother Lu, I know that there are people in the Jianghu who are more handsome than me, so I can't be ranked first in any aspect." Lu Fengxian looked at Fang Qishao in a daze, wondering if Chu Xiu had introduced the wrong person. He had heard the name of Sword Chief Fang Qishao for a long time, but he did not expect Fang Qishao to be such a narcissistic guy. Lu Fengxian was not narcissistic, but he also knew how his appearance was. No matter how humble he was, he could feel that in terms of handsomeness, Fang Qishao was not only a little inferior, but the two of them could not be compared at all. Chu Xiu shrugged at Lu Fengxian, indicating that Fang Qishao was really such a person, and he did not recognize the wrong person. Lv Fengxian couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. This was truly unexpected. Could it be that there was something unusual about this extraordinary person? Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian sat next to Fang Qishao, and immediately attracted many people's attention. The people in the inner hall were basically people with some strength and fame in the Jianghu, and they thought for a while and recognized Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian. After all, with the fame of these two, it was not difficult to guess. It was rare to see three people in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard sitting together, but other than Lu Fengxian, it seemed that Chu Xiu and Fang Qishao were not well liked. One was scolded, and the other made people speechless. Chapter 483. Chu Xiu was with Lu Fengxian and Fang Qishao. With their status, no one came to disturb them for a while. Chu Xiu's reputation in Jianghu was not very good. Although many people wanted to make friends with Fang Qixiao, it was a pity that Fang Qixiao had stayed here for a long time. Those who wanted to make friends with Fang Qixiao were almost all rejected by Fang Qixiao's mouth. Fang Qixiao seemed a little funny when he was with Chu Xiu, a young talent of the same level. But when it came to those who were not as strong as him, his mouth was very poisonous. It definitely made people want to fight with him. Of course, those who wanted to fight with him could not beat him, and the martial arts masters who could beat Fang Qixiao also had to worry about the reputation of Sword King City. As more and more people came, Chu Xiu also saw many acquaintances, such as Yan Fian, the Cloud Sword Fairy of the Yunu Palace. Chu Xiu had some enmity with the Yunu Palace. Although the last time in Tong Tian Tower, because of LV Fengxian's mediation, the enmity was resolved, but he still had nothing to say to the women of the Yunu Palace. However, no matter what, LV Fengxian had saved Yan Fian once last time. Hence, when Yan Fian came in this time, he specially nodded at LV Fengxian, but then walked to the side. As one of the four great beauties of the martial arts world, Yan Fian was not as strong as Chu Xiu and the others, but she was very famous. Almost as soon as she came in, she was surrounded by a group of martial artists of the younger generation, fighting to be the first to flatter her. Fang Qixiao pinched his chin and said doubtfully, "Yan Fian, this woman, used to be indifferent when she saw me in the past. Why did she suddenly greet me today? Could it be that she is interested in me? This is not good. The people of the Yunu Palace do not marry outside. Marrying them is equivalent to marrying trouble. This is not good." Chu Xiu found this funny. He couldn't help but shake his head and say, "Some women can't be easily subdued. Yan Fian isn't someone to be trifled with. Even if she's interested in you, the Yunu Palace won't stop you. Do you dare to marry her?" Fang Qixiao thought about it and said, "I really wouldn't dare. That woman is not easy to deal with. However, there are people who are devoted to her. Just watch, as long as Yan Fian comes, she will definitely be followed by an infatuated person. For this opening mountain ceremony, that infatuated person has a 90% chance of coming." LV Fengxian asked curiously, "Infatuated seed? Who?" Fang Qixiao's sword-like eyebrows suddenly twitched towards the door and said, "Speaking of immortals, immortals will arrive. See, the infatuated seed has already arrived." At the door, a black-robed Ing Bailu stepped into the hall with a calm smile on his face. Ing Bailu seemed to have an innate ability. As long as he appeared, he would definitely attract everyone's attention and become the focus of the entire hall. He was as dazzling as the sun. Everyone looked at Ing Bailu, and at this moment, they couldn't help but think of 6 words: outstanding young master, unparalleled in this world. These words were very appropriate to describe Ing Bailu. Even if his ranking on the dragon and tiger roll was not as high as Chu Xiu and Fang Qixiao, in the eyes of everyone, he was much more reliable than Chu Xiu and Fang Qixiao. Moreover, everyone present also subconsciously looked at Chu Xiu. They knew that not long ago, Chu Xiu had pushed Ing Bailu's ranking down 1 place on the dragon and tiger roll, causing him to fall out of 5th place. Now that the two of them were facing each other, would they directly fight? A battle between the top 5 geniuses on the dragon and tiger roll would be quite interesting. However, to everyone's surprise, although Ing Bailu saw Chu Xiu, he did not have any intention of walking towards Chu Xiu. Instead, he walked straight towards Yan Fian. When the young cultivators surrounding Yan Fian saw Ing Bailu, their expressions changed and they immediately scattered. They were people who knew themselves well. Compared to Ing Bailu, they had no advantage at all. In front of Ing Bailu, these people could only feel ashamed of their inferiority. If they continued to stay here, they would only be making a fool of themselves. Ing Bailu looked at Yan Fian and said softly, "Miss Yan, we meet again. Since we last met, Miss Yan's cultivation has improved a lot. Congratulations." As he spoke, Ing Bailu took out a brocade box and handed it to Yan Fian. "Miss Yan, this is the 100 flower dew that I specially collected. Each of them is made from flower dew of the 6th revolution and above. They are very helpful for Miss Yan's cultivation. Yan Fian shook her head lightly and sighed, young Master Ing, you should take such a precious thing back. Fian can't afford it. Ing Bailu shook his head and said, if even you, Miss Yan, can't handle the 100-blossom dew, then there's really no one in this world who can. Take it. This is just a token of my appreciation. You know my personality, I won't force anything. Yan Fian frowned slightly. She did not dislike Ing Bailu. It should be said that there was no woman who would dislike a man like Ing Bailu. Unfortunately, Yan Fian knew that she did not have any feelings for Ing Bailu. Even if she did, there would be no ending to this relationship. She was a disciple of the Yu Palace and the successor of the Yu Palace. In this life, she was destined to take over the Yu Palace and make it strong again. Feelings did not belong to her, and she did not even dare to think about it. Therefore, she knew Ing Bailu's intentions, but Yan Fian kept rejecting him. Young Master Ing, I appreciate your kindness, but I really can't accept this. Yan Fian rejected him. Ing Bailu sighed and said softly, only Miss Yan is worthy of using the 100-flower dew. Since you don't want it, then it has lost its meaning. As soon as he finished speaking, a faint golden aura burst out from Ing Bailu's hand, and the brocade box directly turned into a cloud of mist. It was too late for the people present to stop it. They could only watch as the rich fragrance of the flowers dissipated in the air. Everyone could not help but shout in their hearts that it was such a waste. The 100-flower dew that was made from hundreds of rare flowers above the 6th revolution actually turned into fireworks just like that. It was such a waste. Fang Qi Shao, who was at the back, shook his head and said, I give up, I really give up. This infatuated person is really willing to do it. His methods of picking up girls are so wasteful. If the Ying family was any weaker, it would not be enough for him to squander. Chu Xiu glanced at Fang Qi Shao. If it were any other aristocratic family, as long as they had a disciple as talented as Ing Bailu, they would probably also be willing to let him squander. Yan Fian looked at Ing Bailu helplessly and said, why do you have to do this? Young Master Ing, it is really impossible between us. Now that my master is injured, part of the Yu Palace's affairs are under my management. I am not in the mood for worldly affairs, and the Yu Palace's rules do not allow it. Ing Bailu stared at Yan Fian and said, sincerity can split open metal and stone. Nothing in this world is impossible. By the way, is Palace Master Lin's injury serious? My Ying family has experts specializing in the medical way, and all kinds of precious spirit herbs. They will definitely be of help to Palace Master Lin. Yan Fian shook her head and said, many thanks for young Master Ying's good intentions, but there is no need to trouble the Ying family. Last time, during the righteous and demonic battles on Floating Jade Mountain, my master was ambushed and injured by those demonic cultivators. Her injury is not serious, but it is a little strange. I have already asked around, and this injury can be treated by West Chu's divine Dr. Feng Buping. Since I am here to participate in the Dong family's mountain opening ceremony, I will invite divine Dr. Feng to my Yu Palace to help treat her. Ing Bailu nodded and said, I have heard of the name, infuriating Yama Feng Buping. Although he comes from an unorthodox background, he does have some skills in the medical way. However, I heard that he has a stubborn personality, and the conditions for treating people are very harsh. But no matter, my Ying family has everything. Whatever Feng Buping wants, I can take it out. At this time, someone in the hall suddenly said, Fairy Yen, if you want to find divine Dr. Feng, you are a step too late. Divine Dr. Feng has already left the Valley of the Dead and went to the Guanzhong Pass to practice medicine. However, his relationship with Lu Fengxian is not bad. As long as little Marquis Wen asks, I believe that divine Dr. Feng might not need anything to treat Palace Mistress Lin. Dead Man Valley was not far from Jianghu County, and Feng Buping's reputation in West Chu was not small. Many people already knew about what happened in Dead Man Valley. However, the person who spoke did not have any good intentions. He was not purposely reminding Yan Fian, but was provoking Ing Bailu to go over to Chu Xiu's side. Everyone knew that Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu were close friends. If Yan Fian went to beg Lu Fengxian, how could Ing Bailu feel good? He was purposely stirring up trouble. As expected, when that person spoke, Yan Fian also looked over at Lu Fengxian. She walked to Lu Fengxian's side and bowed to Lu Fengxian. Young hero Lu, we meet again. Is Divine Dr. Feng really in the Guangzhou area? Yan Fian had a very deep impression of Lu Fengxian. Last time in Tong Tian Tower, it was Lu Fengxian who saved her. Although she did not have Lu Fengxian, she still had a trump card, but it would make her pay a certain price. However, what truly left a deep impression on Yan Fian was that Lu Fengxian actually used this favor to resolve the conflict between the Yunnu Palace and Chu Xiu. In the current Jianghu, morality and justice were placed on the two sides, while benefits were placed in the middle. There were not many who could be as loyal as Lu Fengxian. And from that time onwards, Yan Fian also saw Lu Fengxian's strength. At that time, she felt that Lu Fengxian was definitely not someone who would stay in a small pond. As expected, in a short period of time, Lu Fengxian was already in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard, and was even below her. And Yan Fian also felt that if they really fought, she most likely would not be able to win against Lu Fengxian. She could be ranked above Lu Fengxian only because she was a woman, one of the four great beauties of the martial world. Her fame and influence was much greater than Lu Fengxian's. Lu Fengxian nodded and said, even if Divine Dr. Feng hasn't reached the Guangzhou area now, he will be there soon. If Miss Yen wants to ask Divine Dr. Feng to treat, I can help you put in a word. However, Divine Dr. Feng has his own rules. As for the consultation fee, I still need Miss Yen to personally discuss it with Divine Dr. Feng. Chapter 484. In this pugilistic world, there was no shortage of onlookers. In the inner hall, there were 5 young talents in the top 10 of the Longhu list. Not to mention the mountain opening ceremony, even during the righteous and demonic battles on Mount Fuyu, there weren't so many people gathered here. The relationship between these 5 people was complicated, and those onlookers couldn't wait for them to fight. At this time, seeing Yan Fian taking the initiative to talk to Lu Fengxian, Ing Bailu slightly frowned. However, he didn't get angry, nor did he flare up. He just walked over to Lu Fengxian and said, then I'll have to trouble Brother Lu to help mediate. Don't worry, as long as Divine Dr. Feng asks, the consultation fee is not a problem. As long as our Shang Rivering clan has it, we will be able to provide it. Seeing Ing Bailu's performance, everyone present couldn't help but secretly praise him. Ing Bailu was indeed Ing Bailu. He really lived up to his reputation. One attitude and one sentence was enough to resolve everything. Ing Bailu's words made it seem as if he and Yan Fian were family. The two of them went to beg Lu Fengxian together, and even narrowed the distance between him and Yan Fian. Hearing Ing Bailu's words, Yan Fian also frowned slightly, but she didn't say anything. If she refused at this time, it would be somewhat embarrassing for Ing Bailu. At this time, Ing Bailu also looked at Chu Xiu and said with a smile, Brother Chu, we meet again. The matter with the Luo clan was just a misunderstanding. As you can see, I only love Lady Yan now. Facing Chu Xiu, who pushed him down the ranking, Ing Bailu's attitude didn't change at all. It was as if he was facing an old friend. At least in the eyes of outsiders, Ing Bailu's attitude was absolutely flawless. Saying this, Ing Bailu also looked at Yan Fian. He wasn't actually explaining to Chu Xiu, but to Yan Fian. He was afraid that Yan Fian would misunderstand something. Chu Xiu touched his nose and said, I can see that if Brother Ing had taken action, it would have been very difficult for me to smoothly escape with Luo Feiheng and the others. Ing Bailu nodded and turned to look at Feng Qishao. He cupped his fists and said, Brother Feng, it's been a while since we last met, right? Feng Qishao poured a cup of wine for Ing Bailu and said with a smile, it's been a while, but I don't want to see you too much. Because as long as I'm with you, as long as it's a woman, her eyes will definitely be glued to you. Treating me like air is not a good feeling. Ing Bailu smiled and said, Brother Feng, you are still so humorous. After exchanging a few words, the atmosphere was very awkward. Therefore, Yan Fian was the first to bid farewell. Ying Bailu also left with Yan Fian. Only then did the atmosphere lighten up. Fang Qishao played with the wine cup in his hand. Suddenly, he laughed strangely and said to Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian, "Actually, Ying Bailu is quite a character." Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu looked at each other, then looked at Fang Qishao. "Do I need you to say that?" Fang Qishao shook his head and said, "What I mean is that Ying Bailu's potential is definitely not limited to this. To put it bluntly, there aren't many people on the dragon and tiger list that can catch my eye. Ying Bailu's potential is terrifying, but it's a pity that he is deeply involved in the tribulations of love. If he can't walk out of it, his life will be miserable." As he said that, Fang Qishao shook his head and muttered something, as if he was mumbling something mysterious. This guy was out of habit. Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian didn't respond and continued to wait in the inner hall. After a while, quite a few people came, and Xia Xiaolu was among them. Seeing Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu, Xia Xiaolu was pleasantly surprised. He walked over and said, "Brother Chu, Brother Lu, you're here too." Compared to Chu Xiu and the others who came uninvited, Xia Xiaolu was invited by the Dong family. The World Alliance was one of the strongest forces in West Chu, and Qinqingdi was famous throughout the world. It was normal for the Dong family to invite the World Alliance. However, Emperor Qinqingdi didn't have the time. His relationship with the Dong family wasn't that good, so he was too lazy to participate in the mountain opening ceremony. Therefore, he directly sent Xia Xiaolu here, which could be considered as giving face to the Dong family. Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian chatted with Xia Xiaolu for a while and introduced him to Fang Qishao. However, Fang Qishao's attitude towards Xia Xiaolu was much colder than Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian. He only gave him a greeting and didn't say much. Even though the seventh young master Fang looked like a clown, he was actually a very prideful person. His sword Dao was naturally formed. Just as he had mentioned earlier, there were not many people on the Longhu leaderboard that could catch his eye. He had experienced Chu Xiu's strength before, so it was enough to obtain his approval. Although he had never fought or interacted with Lu Fengxian, there were no weaklings in the top 10 of the Tiger and Dragon list. Most importantly, Lu Fengxian had an appearance that could make a narcissistic person like Fang Qishao feel ashamed. Just based on this point, Lu Fengxian was enough to obtain Fang Qishao's approval. As a disciple of Qinqingdi, Xia Xiaolu was also in the top 20 of the Tiger and Dragon list. Compared to other people, he was naturally an outstanding young hero, but compared to people like Fang Qishao, he was still a level lower. However, Xia Xiaolu didn't care about it. In his view, this was Fang Qishao who was ranked third on the Tiger and Dragon list. It was normal for Fang Qishao to have this kind of cold attitude. Of course, if Xia Xiaolu knew what kind of personality Fang Qishao had, he would probably have a feeling that his image had collapsed. In the Dong family's mountain opening ceremony, everyone who should come had already arrived. From the Dong family's side, a young martial artist in his 20s walked over and cupped his hands towards everyone present. "Everyone, the mountain opening ceremony is about to begin. Please come to the back mountain." The people in the inner hall all stood up and followed the young man to the back mountain of the Dong family. At this time, there were already many people gathered at the back mountain. In addition to the Dong family's disciples, there were even a few martial Dao grandmasters. The mountain opening ceremony was a big event for the Dong family, so it was better to invite a few martial Dao grandmasters to participate in it. Moreover, the rule of the mountain opening ceremony was that anything found by the martial artists who came to help would belong to them. Of course, only the things that could be taken away, and the things that could not be taken away would belong to the Dong family. In this way, neither side would suffer a loss. The Dong family's strength was considered middle among the 9 great families, and they had 2 martial Dao grandmasters. Among them, the Dong family's old ancestor, who was slightly older, was in charge of the Dong family, while the Dong family's patriarch, Dong Qikuan, who was in his prime, led the Dong family's disciples to cut down the forest. When Chu Xiu and the others arrived, a martial Dao Grand Master beside Dong Qikuan saw Chu Xiu. His face suddenly sank, and he said coldly, "Chu Xiu, you still dare to stay in West Chu? Do you really take I's words as farts?" This martial Dao Grand Master was Floating Blood Sword Xiao Yindong. He was also one of the martial Dao Grand Masters invited by the Jianghu Dong family to participate in the mountain opening ceremony. After the incident in the Dead Man Valley, Xiao Yindong felt that something was wrong the more he thought about it. Wasn't it a little too careless for him to be scared away by Chu Xiu just like that? However, he had already said it, and it was too late to regret it. This matter was considered over. However, he did not expect that Chu Xiu would actually appear in the Jianghu Dong family again. Back then, he had given Chu Xiu and himself a way out. As long as Chu Xiu left West Chu, this matter would be considered over. However, now that Chu Xiu appeared here again, it was obvious that he was forcing him to take action. Chu Xiu said calmly, "Senior Qiao, you're so mighty. Do you think the land of West Chu belongs to your family? You can't let anyone stay here if you don't want them to. I think even the West Chu royal family is not as mighty as you." Xiao Yindong's face darkened. He was scared away by Chu Xiu last time. This time, he wanted to see if this Chu Xiu really had the strength to fight a martial Dao Grand Master. However, at this moment, the Dong family's patriarch, Dong Qikuan, frowned slightly. The mountain opening ceremony was going to be held at noon. This was not the place to fight. Therefore, Dong Qikuan immediately pulled Xiao Yindong and said, "Brother Qiao, you're also a senior in the martial world. Why do you have to be so calculative with a young martial artist?" Xiao Yindong snorted coldly and said, "I don't want to be calculative with this young martial artist, but this Chu Xiu keeps provoking me again and again. If I don't even respond, where do you want me to put my face?" Dong Qikuan had no intention of mediating the grudge between Xiao Yindong and Chu Xiu. He just didn't want these two guys to disrupt the mountain opening ceremony. Dong Qikuan glanced at Chu Xiu and secretly transmitted his voice, "Brother Qiao, give me some face. If you want to resolve the grudge between you two, wait until after the mountain opening ceremony. The auspicious time has been chosen. If it's too late, it won't be a good omen. Moreover, look at the people around Chu Xiu. Although they are all young martial artists, none of them are easy to mess with. He has Sword King City's heir, Sword Chief Fang Qi Shao, and World Alliance's Qingdi's disciple, Xie Shaolu, on his side. Sword King City is in the western regions. Even if you don't give face to Sword King City, don't tell me you won't give face to Qingdi." Xiao Yindong's body stiffened when he heard the three words Qingdi, and the tense atmosphere completely dissipated. In the land of West Chu, Qingdi's strength was not the strongest. There were many powerhouses in the land of West Chu, such as Longhu Mountain Celestial Master Abode, Moon-worshipping Cult, Forgetting Sword Hut. There were many who were stronger than Qingdi, but Qingdi's reputation was the greatest. With a pair of iron fists, Emperor Qing's domineering aura was unparalleled. Others would abide by the rules of Jianghu, but Qingdi would only use his pair of iron fists to break any rules. In the past, Xiao Yindong dared to go to Longhu Mountain to demand justice, but he did not dare to go to the World Alliance to say a word. Now that Qingdi's disciple was here, he was also afraid of offending Qingdi. Therefore, Xiao Yindong could only coldly snort and say, "Today, I will give Patriarch Dong some face and will not make things difficult for you here. But if you continue to be so ungrateful, don't blame me for bullying the weak." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. He did not take Xiao Yindong seriously at all. A martial Dao grandmaster like Xiao Yindong who was born as a rogue cultivator was strong, but he was very cautious. Although Chu Xiu did not hear what Xiao Yindong said to Dong Qikuan, he could guarantee that Xiao Yindong was not afraid of Fang Qi Shao's identity, but Xie Shaolu. Chapter 485. The mountain opening ceremony offered sacrifices to both the heavens and the people. After the great calamity of ancient times, the land of West Chu was filled with wilderness and dense forests. Vicious beasts and evil spirits were everywhere. Not to mention being suitable for ordinary people to live in, even if martial artists entered it, few could survive. The current West Chu had gone through tens of thousands of years of arduous reclamation by their predecessors. Only then did it have its current flourishing appearance. Therefore, every time the mountain opening ceremony was held, apart from offering sacrifices to the heavens, it also had to offer sacrifices to the ancestors who had painstakingly paved the way for the future generations. On the hillside behind the Dong family's residence, a huge table was placed in the center. The crowd stood in the back, and only the people of the Dong family stood beside the table. On those huge tables were not the 3 animals used by ordinary people to offer sacrifices. Instead, there were ferocious beasts, tigers, leopards, and so on. Moreover, they were all alive. At this time, a wizened old sorcerer wearing colorful clothes and a ferocious ghost mask walked to the center of those tables and began to dance. Although it looked somewhat comical, it gave off a simple and desolate feeling. The land of West Chu was popular in the ghost god witchcraft technique. The moon-worshipping cult was the master of this technique. Even if the Dong family belonged to the 9 great families and was considered a righteous sect, they would rather believe in these traditional things than not. As the old warlock danced, he sang something in an incomprehensible language. As his singing spread, the tigers, leopards, and beasts that were struggling strangely became unusually obedient, like cats. At this time, the other warriors of the Dong family walked over with sharp blades in their hands and started to bleed the beasts. Even if they saw their own blood flowing, the beasts could only stare blankly at it. Their bodies twitched, but they didn't resist at all. As the old sorcerer's singing and dancing stopped, the blood of the beasts also flowed out and gathered in the center, unexpectedly turning into a very strange blood-red rune, mysterious and evil. Dong Chikuan raised his wine bowl to the sky and said loudly, "A toast to the heavens, bless my Dong family's safety." His internal force erupted, and the wine in the bowl evaporated into the air. Dong Chikuan poured another bowl of wine on the ground and said loudly, "A toast to the heavens, bless my Dong family's harvest." Finally, Dong Chikuan forced out a drop of his blood and poured it on the ground. He said in a deep voice, "A toast to the ancestors, bless my Dong family's prosperity for generations." After 3 bowls of wine, Dong Chikuan said in a deep voice, "The mountain opening ceremony is complete. Everyone, bless my Dong family's safety." With these words, the members of the Dong clan took the lead and walked into the pitch-black forest that was densely covered by trees. Chu Xiao and the others looked at each other, before following the crowd into the undeveloped desolate land. Chu Xiao and others looked at each other and followed the crowd into the mountain. It was unknown how the trees in the West Chu land grew, but they were over 30 feet tall. Some of the giant trees were so thick that it would take several people to wrap their arms around them. There were dense trees everywhere. Even if you flew up into the sky, you wouldn't be able to see what was inside. Therefore, during the opening ceremony, members of the Dong clan would bring all kinds of tools and leave marks in this area. Then, they would sweep through the entire area and record which places were safe and where there were mineral resources. After that, they would cut down the valuable trees in these areas and pave the way. From then on, this area would be the Dong clan's territory. Compared to the lands of northern Yan and eastern Qi, the various powers of West Chu also competed with each other, but it was not as intense. The remaining land is so big. If you want it, you can rely on your own strength to cut down the forest and bear the danger. There is no need to fight with others. Of course, this is just a normal method. In fact, there are many dangers in this forest. All kinds of strange poisonous insects and fierce beasts are just a small path. The most difficult to deal with are the evil creatures left behind from ancient times. Chu Xiao, Fang Qi Shao, Lu Fengxian, and Xia Xiaolu walked together. Apart from Chu Xiao and Lu Fengxian, who were seriously exploring, Fang Qi Shao and Xia Xiaolu were somewhat absent-minded. Seventh young master Fang casually waved his hand, and a stream of sword chi sliced a dark green little snake that was about to pounce on them while hiding in the dead leaves. He said lazily, I say, let's just walk around for a bit and then we'll get out of here. Aside from the beginning when they performed the great shaman dance, what else is there to look at in this deep mountain forest? For rogue cultivators, even if they didn't find any ancient treasures, there were still many rare flowers and herbs that could be harvested for medicinal purposes. But for Fang Qixiao, he was the successor of Sword King's city. How could he lack these things? Even if a 5th revolution or 6th revolution spirit herb was at his feet, he wouldn't even bother to pick it. Chu Xiu cast a glance at 7th young Master Fang. This guy's mouth is really a big problem. He actually described the solemn mountain opening ceremony of the Dong clan as a dance. If these words were heard by the people of the Dong clan, they would definitely fight him to the death. Dong family's opening mountain ceremony covers such a large area. What if we find some ancient ruins? Although there are some things we can't take away, even if we can take away 1 or 2 of them, it won't be a wasted trip. Chu Xiu said calmly as he walked in a certain direction. Chu Xiu didn't know where the ancient demon god Lv Wenho's inheritance land was. However, he knew the specific location according to the original plot. Although Chu Xiu didn't know some of the details, he just had to deal with it when the time came. In the original plot, Lu Fengxian's strength was almost the same as it was now. He could obtain the inheritance by himself. Now that Chu Xiu joined them, their chances should be higher. Fang Qixiao shrugged his shoulders. In any case, he wasn't interested in most of the inheritances. He didn't even care about some of the sword Daoists in Sword King's city, let alone the others. After walking in the direction according to his memory for nearly a day and a half, Fang Qixiao started to get impatient. He came here to join in the fun. However, apart from the opening mountain ceremony, which was a bit interesting, they spent the rest of the time wandering in the barren mountains and forests. Occasionally, they would kill some fierce beasts and roast them. However, due to their poor cooking skills, the roast beasts didn't taste good. Therefore, Fang Qixiao started to get annoyed. Just as Fang Qixiao was getting impatient and was about to leave, Lu Fengxian suddenly said, "Something's wrong." Chu Xiu nodded. Fang Qixiao also nodded with rapt attention. Only Xia Xiaolu was confused and asked, "What's wrong?" Chu Xiu pointed to the front and said, "The sound." Xia Xiaolu immediately reacted. Indeed, the sound was a bit wrong. Although there was no aura coming from the front, it was completely silent. It had to be known that in the West Chu jungle, there were countless fierce beasts, snakes, and insects. There would definitely be all kinds of sounds coming from there. However, there was only silence in front of them. There was only one possibility. There was a very terrifying existence in front of them. The aura it emitted made the sensitive snakes, insects, and fierce beasts not dare to approach. Chu Xiu and the others looked at each other. At this time, even Fang Qixiao became interested. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Be careful." The few of them nodded and headed in that direction. After walking for around 4 hours, Chu Xiu and the others could feel that something was wrong. The pressure in front of them was getting stronger and stronger. Especially the ground under their feet was filled with a dark red color, as if blood had dyed the ground red. Continuing forward, the trees became sparser and a strange thing appeared in front of them. It was strange to the point that Chu Xiu and the others didn't know how to describe it. It was a giant building that was thousands of meters tall. It was like a giant bowl that was upside down on the ground. In one direction, there was a giant wordless stone tablet. If this thing was shrunk 1,000 times, everyone would be very familiar with it. This was a tomb, a huge tomb, a tomb that suppressed a demon god. This was the tomb of the ancient demon god Lu Wenho. It couldn't even be called a tomb, because it was not used to bury Lu Wenho, but rather used by his enemies to suppress him. The history of the ancient times was extremely chaotic. There were many legends about the life of the demon god Lu Wenho, but no one knew the real situation. But now, people could be sure that Lu Wenho was not a good person. A good person would not be called a demon god. In the past, many experts besieged Lu Wenho and his subordinates. It was said that Lu Wenho's cultivation was extremely high. He had cultivated the 9 heavens fiend golden body to the level of immortal demon body. Broken limbs could be regenerated, and even beheaded could be used to kill enemies. So, even if people killed Lu Wenho, they couldn't guarantee that he was really dead. So, they deliberately built such a big tomb to suppress Lu Wenho and his subordinates, so that they could never be reincarnated. It could be said that it was very vicious, but it also showed how terrifying Lu Wenho was. Fang Qishao looked at the big tomb and murmured, "What is this thing? The key is, how do we enter it?" Since this big tomb was originally prepared to suppress Lu Wenho, it naturally didn't leave any entrance. The surroundings were sealed, not even a gap was left. Chu Xiu glanced at the other side of the big tomb and said lightly, "Don't worry, people have already started. Just follow behind them." When Chu Xiu and the others arrived at the other side of the big tomb, they found Dong Qikuan leading dozens of martial artists of the Dong clan, Xiao Yindong, and another martial Dao Grand Master were already studying how to enter the tomb. However, after much discussion, they could only come up with the conclusion that they should attack by force. But this big tomb was still very exciting for Dong Qikuan and the others. Although Chu Xiu was the only one present who knew what was buried in it, others could tell that it was absolutely not an ordinary thing just by looking at its size and the power it exuded. Even if it was a major power like the Dong family, they wouldn't always have a harvest in every opening ceremony. This time, only a few days had passed since the opening ceremony, and they had already discovered such an ancient ruin. Dong Qikuan really thought that it was the blessing of the ancestors. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.